It's time for MacBreak Weekly, reassembled for 2025. Andy, Alex, and Jason are all here. We're going to celebrate a very important birthday for Mac users. We'll talk about Apple's $95 million fine. They agreed to nothing, admit nothing, and a couple of new Vision Pro ideas. All that coming up and a whole lot more next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 954, recorded Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Lickable interface. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show we cover the latest Apple news with Mr. Jason Snell of sixcolors.com.
Hello.
Occasionally, you'll see his stories at Macworld and elsewhere.
Happy New Year to
Happy
you,
New
Leo,
Year.
to everybody.
Happy New Year to you and your brain, and your many visits this year to Sky Harbor Airport.
Oh, yeah, so many flights.
It's great to have you at home today.
Good
I
to be
hope
here.
you had a wonderful holiday. Also, you, Mr. Andy Nako, you're celebrating the. So if it's called Little Christmas, is this Little Boxing Day?
There should be. I didn't.
Yeah.
I use Little Christmas as an excuse to have a nice dinner, but actually now I have an excuse to do some shopping. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Andy Nako from WGBH in Boston, who celebrates Christmas twice, and from OfficeHours.global, Mr. Alex Lindsay. Happy New Year, Alex.
Hello. Good to be here.
2025. Welcome to the Gulf of America.
It does feel like a yawning gulf, doesn't it?
Yes, we're all in it. The maw of America. That would be even better. Let's see. So 1821, right? I feel like I got an announcement. Is that not true?
Yeah, but when I see point something, I figure, okay, whatever it is that they didn't have time to fix for 18.2, they finally said, yeah, that's enough of a bug to fix it in 0.2, not enough of a bug to fix it at the time. So
yeah,
I didn't really pay attention to it.
I didn't pay any attention to it. There it is. We got it right there.
I was distracted. There was figgy pudding everywhere. And that stuff goes bad, and you can't freeze it. So it's
So this update provides important bug fixes and is recommended for all users and is half a gigabyte. When did the days end where we would pay attention to the size of files and the internet?
You think that the size of it has to do with Apple Intelligence, that from now on there just aren't going to be any compact updates because they got to shove a new on-device model to you, if they have to fix anything.
That makes sense. In fact, we did learn that the Apple Intelligence is doubled in size.
Yeah, 95 Mac said something about how it's 7 gigabytes for 18.2 versus 4 gigabytes for 18.1. So that's how much Apple Intelligence is going to cost you for storage.
That's how much more intelligent it is.
Yes.
Well, I'm doing the update now. I guess it's for iOS and iPadOS. Do we know anything? Presumably, there's some security stuff. Apple's never very open about what kinds of security patches they're providing, right? Because they don't want to give the bad guys any hints.
Well, no, don't they usually do? Isn't there a page in the developer that basically says here's what the security update entails?
I feel like they don't really say until later. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me look and see what the security update is.
This update provides important bug fixes and is recommended for all users. That's the entirety.
That's it. That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay. You might have a point there.
18.2.1 iOS, an iPad. It doesn't. There's no CVE entries.
Published CVE entries,
that's an
at least
important.
yet.
Yeah.
But clearly, when they say you should update it, that means there's something there.
That's, I guess, what I'm getting to is this is for security as well, whether they say it or not. This is
and just as a rule, there's never a reason not to download a point something update, because the integer updates are always huge disruptive changes. Even if everything works properly, the point something changes can inflict new problems that you aren't prepared to deal with. But the point something is always okay. We fixed something minor that we didn't have time to do 3 months ago, and so now here it is.
What say you to that, Alex Lindsay? I know you have a rule about point updates?
I update. I'm pretty aggressive about my my mobiles. Probably too aggressive.
Should be. You should be. Right?
But I'm pretty. So my mobile, my iPads. I'm on the beta. I just upgrade whatever it says upgrade. On a handful of my computers, on my Mac Minis, I'm usually upgrading to the newest released schedule. So not betas, but I'm doing those. And then for my main computer, I'm usually a year behind. So. And that has less to do with Apple. I mean, it has something to do with Apple, but it also has to do with, I use a lot of software that takes a long time to update. So things like Autonate's Dante is a good example of something that is not still, it just might be just starting to work right now. so because and especially when you're dealing with loopback or you're doing with anything that's digging deep into the OS, there's more for them to update, and it takes them a little longer once they have it there and once people are using it. So I let I stay back on my main production computer for typically a year. I might start thinking about it February, March, but the other ones I'm pretty aggressive about because I feel like I need to know what's going on. And there's all this good stuff. There's all this candy that's laying around, and I want some of the candy too.
Not in this case. I think it's.
But point ones, I'm not too afraid of.
Like this one does not have any new features, so that's probably why it is a bug fix, right?
But I think as a bug fix, the point ones I think are oftentimes the most stable updates because they're not all they're doing is doing house cleaning, not doing any kind of adding features. Yeah.
Not anymore, though. Now they're plowing in new features and Apple Intelligence and all sorts of stuff like that.
Again, like for my mobile devices, I'm pretty like, whatever. Let's just keep going. And with my Mac Studio is the one that stays way behind, so that I can always have something to go back to and get stuff done.
There are some 18.3 betas that are cycling through. There were new ones that dropped earlier today. Those are so far quiet. I don't know whether that's just going to be a quiet cycle or whether there's going to be another beta that gets released that adds features in that aren't in there. But it sounds like maybe 18.3 is being worked on quietly, and then there'll be an 18.4 that will be out later. That will be the one that has those kind of last remaining Apple Intelligence features. It's kind of unclear right now, but they're still working in the background.
And so our general devices update, you should update. It's good update. No noticeable problems. This, by the way, yesterday was I didn't note this, but I will note it now. I didn't note it yesterday, have a party or anything, but it's the 25th anniversary of OS 10.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, or at least it's the 2000 Macworld Expo where Steve Jobs unveiled the Aqua interface and showed off what we really think of. I mean, I watched the whole video. I wrote a piece about it at Macworld. Actually, technically, I wrote a piece about it at Macworld in the year 2000, and that's up there.
Good.
You can read that
5 years later.
And I found the files on in an archive on my server, and I still have the Word files that I wrote. It turns out I wrote that whole story that day. Went back to the office. I've still got the timestamps on it from that day, January 2000. And anyway, I wrote a news story on Macworld about it on Sunday, and it's quite a trip to watch that event because. I mean, there are so many anniversaries of OS 10 because there's when 10.0 shipped and when the public beta shipped and when they brought Steve on stage in 1997 and when they brought him back in 1998 and he was there talking about the transition. But for me, this is the big one because so much of what he's demoing, first off, people are reacting to it like they've never seen anything like it. And yet from the perspective of 25 years later, it all seems totally normal. And that's the thing is at the time, it did kind of blow you away as a Mac user because it was a completely new interface. But all that stuff, keep in mind the Mac was only 16 years old at that point. And Steve Jobs even undersold it and said, this will be the foundation of what we do for the next decade. And it's like, well, okay, quarter of a century later, still so much of what he showed is just what the Mac is now. Yep. It really was a remarkable moment. So if you need to celebrate a single kind of birthday for OS 10, I think this is it. I think this is the one.
Yeah, and 100% the significance of OS 10. Remember that OS 10 was from the very, very get-go designed to be the foundation of everything Apple does in the future. So when it became time to do a phone interface, there's OS 10, and now we've turned that into iPhone OS. When an iPad became a version of OS 10, that was an iPad OS. Everything is now built on OS 10, and from the very, very get-go, it was designed to be CPU non-specific, so that if at any point they wanted to make a change to what CPU they were using, they wouldn't have to undo everything in order to do it. And also make sure that we all remember, if those of us who are there for the 90s, man, Mac OS was in a really sad state. People were switching, lifelong like Mac lovers were switching to Windows because it was simply more stable. It would, if something, it had the ability to like let a piece of code crash without taking the entire platform down with it. And so many, even not only that, but creature comforts of life, prettiness, things like that. It was so stagnant that we felt as though, thank goodness, we don't have to leave the Mac. Apple realizes they have a problem here. They're not going to try to just keep polishing the same incandescent light bulb. We're going into the LED.
And the problem, we were polishing 80 light bulbs. I mean, I remember trying to buy my parents a computer, and I got an Apple IIe when I was 12 and have Apple computers all the way up into it. And it's 1996 or 1997. And I'm trying to buy my parents a computer, and I couldn't figure out which one to buy because there were so many, and they were all so close together. Like, do I need the TV option, or do I need the CD? Like there was so many versions of it, and I just was so frustrated that I ended up not getting them one. I got something else for them or something. Like, it was just like, I'm not like, it was like, it was a disaster. I mean, it just, and it was, and I think most companies have fall into this thing where they try to compete with Microsoft head to head. Like, we're going to do everything that Microsoft does, and Microsoft's a different beast. Like, it's got its own ecosystem, and learning, trying to do what Microsoft does is usually a recipe for disaster. And Apple was one of the first ones to really go down that path.
It all turned around when they brought Steve Jobs back, and along with Steve Jobs, they brought the next operating
that's
system.
the thing, is Jobs came back because they needed an operating system.
Right.
And they had tried multiple times to do that in those 16 years. They had tried Tangent and Pink. They had tried Copeland.
Symphony.
What ended up shipping as OS 8 was really just a cleanup of System 7 and the classic Mac OS.
And then you had BOS building.
Yeah. They were the BOS. They wanted to sell BOS to Apple, and Apple didn't want to buy it. Guess they tried that. And the thing is, like, classic Mac OS, as much as it was loved, I mean, it was a product of that late 70s, early 80s, early days of personal computers, and it was not a modern operating system in any sense of the word. And so they were desperate to do something. Next Step ended up being the answer, and then Steve came along with a ride. Pretty good throw-in, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And Andy's absolutely right. By the way, in that era, I was working at Mac User magazine in the those mid to late 90s, and I remember I have these visceral memories of force rebooting my Mac multiple times a day because it would crash to a dead stop, and that was because there was no protected memory. The multitasking wasn't really real, and that's part of what's in this Jobs presentation. It's like there's a moment where he's playing a video and he drops a menu bar down and the video keeps playing and people lose their minds. And you're like, as a modern person, you're like, why? But like back then, if you drop that menu bar, the whole Mac stopped to drop a menu item because it couldn't multitask.
I was doing the radio show at the time, and I was very critical of Apple because System 7 and OS 9, which is the current operating system at this time, had terrible memory management. Yeah. And that's what you're talking
Atrocious.
about. Because it didn't have modern memory management. It couldn't do anything a modern computer could do.
One bad app took down the whole system. In fact, Jobs demos it. He has an app called The Bomb that he runs in this 2000 demo. And he says, this does everything. It writes to memory everywhere it can. And he's playing a video. It's actually the Mission Impossible 2 trailer because Tom Cruise is immortal. And he runs the Bomb app, and the video just keeps playing in the background. And again, people lose their minds. But like as a Mac user, like something like that just takes down the system and you got to reboot. And they couldn't do it. And so the other thing about this that's really interesting is he's trying to sell, I mean, Jobs, what a salesman, right? He's trying to sell OS 10 to Mac users here. And the thing about it is it's important that he does this because, to Andy's point, especially, Windows in this era, the era of the wind in the sails from Windows 95, like already everybody, especially like the design pros, everybody's like, go to Windows NT, go to Windows, drop the Mac. Steve Jobs can't just sell this thing as, hey, we built you a brand new operating system for you to switch to. Because if they do that, everybody who's got a brain in their head is going to look at it and say, well, if I'm going to have to adapt to a brand new operating system that is nothing like what I've used before, I'll just go to Windows. Like, The only thing holding people on the Mac was familiarity with the Mac. So all these next step engineers come in, and there is huge friction between the Next people and the Apple people. But they've got the Next has the code base. If they implement Next features, they don't have to rewrite the code. But then it doesn't look like the Mac because Next Step is very weird and not very Mac-like. But if they don't make it Mac-like enough to satisfy Mac users, they'll just switch to Windows. So it was really an existential moment for Apple to get OS 10 right. And keep in mind, they bought Next in 97. This is 2000 where they announced what they were going to do in terms of the interface. And they said they'd ship it that summer. They didn't ship it that summer. They shipped a public beta. They shipped it the next summer. So we're talking like a 4+ year period just to get to 10.0 shipping. Yeah. It took them a long time. But what is brilliant about it is what they shipped. It took a while. 0.0 wasn't very good. 0.1 was a lot better. They had to optimize for speed. 0.0 was really slow. But they did indeed build the foundation for Apple's future, not just for a decade, not just for the Mac, but for all these other interfaces and for a quarter century and counting. It's really quite remarkable. It's a very hard problem to solve, and they did end up getting there.
And not only did they solve it, they sold it. And I think we just have to keep on coming back to how good Steve Jobs was at selling things.
Was this his best example of? It was an early example, but one of his better examples of Steve Jobs, the pitchman, the seller.
I think so. I mean, I think that his pinnacle was definitely.
This is the one where he said
the
one
iPhone
of the design goals.
This is real.
You quote this in Macworld's your Macworld piece. One of the design goals, Steve said, was when you saw it, you wanted to lick it.
Yep.
Very famous, right?
And then how long did we deal with all that Aqua? How many buttons did we have to create? I had finally created a set of actions in Photoshop that would create the Aqua button. So you could just select it and hit a button, and hit go, and it would just go and turn it into an Aqua button because that's how you look modern. And then there was some point that it all was not modern anymore.
I remember for a hot minute there, they said, "Hey, we thought that the Apple menu would look good in the middle of this menu bar instead of to the side."
Non-functional logo. And then that was one of those public beta things where people were like, "No, you need an Apple menu," and they retasked the Apple menu.
It really wasn't until 10.4 until it was a finished, usable operating system. It was they made lots of progress, and I think but there was a while before. Okay, will it print? Yes. Will I file compatibility? Yes. Will all the multitasking work? Yes. All this sort of stuff that we were waiting to actually. And the thing is, Steve Jobs created a picture of an Apple that finally had its stuff together, and that if they said that we have a plan and we have a plan to execute that plan, you might even start to believe them. I mean, this was before OS 10. This was when they were trying to develop Rhapsody, when they're trying to develop Symphony, Copeland, all this sort of stuff. This was the time where I was still getting emails that were intended for worldwide Apple executives at the VP level. And so I was hearing about lots of backbiting, about lots of stuff of wasted effort. Oh, well, the print system kind of works, but we decided to toss everything and put this under a new manager for organizational reasons. And that, as much as anything else, I mean, you could write an entire book just about all the things that Apple needed to do and successfully did to convince each other that they had their act together finally, and to actually become the seeds of the company that they would once become.
Well, and I think part of
James Thompson talks about watching this because, of course, he's very well known as the author of PCalc and Drag Thing. But before there was Drag Thing, he wrote the doc for this, and he talks about his experience of watching. And this is the original doc, which was hideous with Square. He talks about watching Steve, hoping it didn't crash from his home in Ireland. It's a really good piece, by the way. If you haven't read it from his three
he's given
letter acronym blog,
he's given a bunch of presentations about this, but he's never put it down in words. And I was writing my story for Macworld, and I sent him an iMessage, and I basically said, is there a preferred link where you tell this story? And he's like, I don't think there is. I think there's just various presentations I've given over time.
So he wrote this up because of you?
And so he wrote that story so I could have something to link to. And it's great. and it's got that classic moment, because the thing is, Steve really wanted everybody in Cupertino. So the classic moment is somebody offhandedly mentions that they'll get their developer who's working on the dock in from Ireland. And Steve goes like, okay. And then goes to another room and finds the manager in charge of James and basically says,
It has come to my attention that the engineer working on the dock is in effing Ireland.
Yeah, and then and so he was given an ultimatum that he had to move to Cupertino or he had to quit. And what instead he refused to move to Cupertino. So what they did is they like gave him an office and they had him fly in and they've like hid him for quite a while. And then finally he was found out and he just said, I'm not going to move to California. So that was it. And he went back to doing Drag Thing. And they threw out his doc. They actually rewrote, the next person on the project rewrote that doc again. Also, that doc demo is weird. There are things in that demo that are very strange. They're like the single window mode that you clicked on another button that was on the right side of the title bar. They got rid of that. The Apple menu in the center was very weird. And the doc at that point, there's actually a doc folder in your user folder. So you could drag a file from the desktop, and Steve does in the demo, onto the doc, and the file disappears from the desktop. And as a modern Mac user, you're like, what? Wait, what? Where'd it go? And then he takes the file off the dock and drags it back to the desktop, and it goes out of the dock onto the desktop. You're like, what? Wait, huh? How? Because they changed that completely later on, that metaphor, because it used to be you could literally just save a file into the dock folder and it would just show up on the dock. Yeah.
By the way, that's how Microsoft did it. And so that's naturally the way that they would attempt it.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to configure then, but much easier just to drag it to the dock. Pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a long thing, but even if you just watch the part where Steve intros it,
let me show you. This is where people go crazy.
So much of it is, oh yeah. Yeah. The genie effect, which was definitely a Steve
Tom Cruise
thing.
Jumps out of the dock
but it doesn't play in the dock. And Steve actually says, we're going to make it so you can actually see the video playing in the dock, but it doesn't actually do it during the demo. And they did get there with that. And there are a bunch of things that clearly are just for Steve, right? Like the Finder, he talks about the Finder, and Finder is very different. It's more like a browser than it was in the original, where there's sort of
that was the next step Finder.
Exactly.
That's our next step.
I love that browser.
But they added, so what they added was they had icon support and list support, which were the things that Mac users were used to. And then Steve, you can hear it in his voice. He's like, and then you've got this really cool column view. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the next view. That's Steve's favorite view.
Yeah.
And he's really into that. Just like he introduces Mail, Apple Mail, also 25 years ago that it was introduced. And that was because Steve's favorite email program was on Next Step. And when he went back to Apple and he was using the Mac, he was really mad because he didn't like the email programs on the Mac, and he got them to start moving Next Step Mail over. And so he's, it's Steve Jobs. If you hate Apple Mail or love it, either way, blame Steve Jobs, because that was Next Mail, and that's what he wanted, and so he got it. And you can see he demos that too, and you can see his delight in it because he loved that app. So there's certain things that Steve clearly made happen because he liked them so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he does this genie effect.
The genie effect, so many. They wired in the slow motion of it so that he could hold down a couple of keyboard commands and do the slow mo.
That's right.
And he just kept doing it. Oh my god! It is showing off that they're using a much more advanced graphics imaging system that's based on PDF, just like how Next was on Display Postgres.
Look how happy he is, though. It's so cute.
It is. I mean, it's literally, it is kind of a masterclass too, because it's just a dude at a keyboard and a mouse. Like, there's not a lot to it. He's just a guy using his computer on stage, and he does a pretty good job.
It was doing things that other computers couldn't do, and it wasn't like, and suddenly it was like, well, it doesn't do that. And I think that one thing that Apple's good at, and I think Steve was exceptionally good at, is picking out things that they're not functional, but they give you like a little, like, oh, that's cool, like that surprise and delight, and that surprise and delight.
That's pretty important.
Just doing something. Well, I think it's actually one of the most important things, because what happens is people make
that's what sticks with you. Yeah.
Well, what people make decisions subconsciously about products, and that's the most dangerous place for them to make those decisions. If they make a decision, because when they do it consciously, you can argue with them and persuade them to go some other direction. But when they subconsciously decide it's cooler or that it's a little sleeker or whatever, when you talk to big companies, they talk about this all. The design teams, like, they're thinking about things like about that kind of thing all the time, of how, if something looks just a little bit more refined or just a little bit cooler, not crazy, but just a little bit more, people like, and that gets into the radiuses of the corners, the how it feels in your hand, all this stuff. And I think that the companies that have done really well have paid a lot of attention to those things. And I think a lot of times, when people don't pay attention to those things, they pay a price, because people make that subconscious decision. There's nowhere to get to it. That's like in the BIOS. Like you can't get to that decision and change it because they don't even see it. They don't see that they've made that decision. And I think that this kind of, there's so many things that Apple does that are in that little world that are subconscious things people make decisions about.
Things that seem trivial now and may have even seemed trivial then that are still really important. I mean, you're absolutely right, Alex. There's a subconscious level going on here. And to, again, beloved, hallowed, venerated classic Mac OS. But here's the thing about classic Mac OS. It was a black and white operating system designed in the early 80s. And although, System 7 and 8 had color and graphite interface and all these things, the bottom line was it was a black and white interface. And that color was sort of like stuck onto it to say, yeah, we got color. But even then, like, sure, you could have a colorful backdrop, but like, everything was still really monochrome with little tiny highlights. And so one of the messages he's sending with Aqua and the Lickable interface and taking the graphics and maximizing them and minimizing them and doing all these things, he's showing you cool special effects that you could probably just wave your hands at it and say it's just sort of trendy graphic junk and it's meaningless and it's just empty calories. But it serves the larger purpose of like, the Mac being the weak sister of computer operating systems in terms of graphics, ironically, as a graphics powerhouse and Photoshop and all that, but the OS itself being kind of this pale thing from the early 80s, that's Steve making it very clear that the era of the Mac being a kind of colorless computer is gone because of the graphics power that this thing had. Now, ironically, all that graphics overhead meant that it was super slow until 0.1 or 0.2. Yeah. They got there, like the hardware advanced and the software got tuned, but he was sending that message right up front that like this was not the old Mac interface with its kind of black and white things everywhere. This was just, everything. Even the buttons were animated, rendered, blue, glossy, lickable things, right? Like that was it was on one level, yes, sort of silly. On another level, super important to send that message.
Yeah. I'm going to speak for the geeks here and say that none of that mattered at all. The real reason this is still an operating system 25 years later is it's based on Unix.
And the Darwin kernel. Yeah.
And it was based on the Mach kernel.
And had a real
the largest install of Unix in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And Unix, by the way, invented in 1970, is also still in widespread use.
We did. We got to do all these articles at Macworld in that era where we started to. I basically hired one of my friends from college who was a Unix guy and said, write articles about how to use the command line because no Mac user knows how to do it. And I found it funny because I learned how to use the command line in college too. And suddenly OS 10 comes out and I think to myself, wait a second. I know how to use VI, right? Yeah, like it's like why are all these skills I learned in 1990 suddenly relevant again? Yeah. But it was actually a huge boon to Mac users to get access to that command line for the first time. Because before that there was like MaxBug and stuff, but really there was no proper command line like you could get on Unix. And then we got it.
To me, it is that, of course, and I use the command line more than anything else on the Mac and Emacs, but it's really the idea of you changed from what people thought not, kind of the people at Bell Labs looked down on them, but people at companies like Microsoft and Apple thought, this would be a good idea for an operating system, to a real operating system, an operating system that was robust, that had memory management, that was scalable, that would get better and better with age instead of break down with age. And that was really the right choice. And it's very lucky they did that.
And in those early days, I don't think the software story gets enough credit. There were, and Jobs talks about this in the presentation, right? There were Cocoa apps, which is basically their next step apps. And there were some of those. The Omni Group had those, and Stone Design had some, and Apple brought some over from Next as well. That was what, going forward, was the native Mac app, Cocoa app experience. And they built Carbon, which was this API that was like basically the Mac compatibility layer that let you spend a little bit, he says like 3 months or whatever, to convert your app so it runs natively on OS 10 using the Carbon APIs from classic Mac OS. And that's what the bulk of the apps were, but it took time for them to come over. What I don't think gets enough credit is that there was also an influx of software that was basically never intended to be on the Mac and was never built for the Mac. It was Unix stuff. Yes. It was X Windows stuff. Yes. And they did over those first few years, you kept seeing all these apps that looked terrible, but they were very powerful. And the reason was that Unix underpinning meant that they could bring it over. And that was in the early days of the Mac. Some of the most mind-blowing apps that came out were actually these ugly things that were brilliant and powerful, and they had never even considered running them on an Apple platform.
VI.
and so, well, I mean, and they would put GUIs on them, and there was a whole class of apps. There are still a few around. Caliber, the ebook app, is a good example of this, where it's really not a good interface on top of it, but it is a cross-platform app that would never have existed before.
Handbrake is really FFmpeg with a nice UI.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a few of these.
Yeah, but in the early days, and the UIs were really bad in the early days, but getting that influx of this stuff where, like, literally, how many people, I knew a lot of people who were basically Unix nerds, and they all started buying Macs because they could get a nice UI when they wanted it, and they could get a command line when they needed it.
Yeah.
And that was super powerful. So it was incredibly good decision to have Unix underneath. And then, of course, that meant that's the layer that was the most easily transportable to the iPhone, the iPad, et cetera.
It actually made it more saleable, because just like they say, you don't market dog food to dogs, you market dog food and you package it and advertise it for the people who buy the dog food. And by suddenly giving all these system administrators and IT people, here's a command line that you will enjoy actually using, it makes it more likely that they're going to recommend this as, why don't we or approve a buy of 100 of these units, because they know that they're going to have a good time using this on their desktops to administer the rest of the network.
Yeah, it's interesting because at this point, in 25 years ago, people couldn't wait to get away from OS 9. But at this point, nobody's saying, oh, how do we replace OS 10? It's so superannuated. We need something better. Nobody's saying that as far as I know, right?
Well, I think we've also gotten to a point where operating systems are it's a pretty mature operating system. We don't know what we would add to it.
But we got there because we had a solid base.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays, I find most advancements in the operating system to be something I complain about more than
don't mess with it.
Like I'm just kind of like, okay, we got it, it's working. Like, let's just make it faster.
Screwing with it. Yeah. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Happy birthday to OS 10. So in fact, come to think of it, every January we're probably going to have happy birthday, because it was all announced at Macworld Expo back in the day. How long before OS 10 shipped, Jason?
So they said they would ship it that summer. They shipped instead what was called the public beta. So they had some developer previews, and then they had the public beta, which you had to pay for, and was broken. And then the next summer, 2001, they shipped 10.0.
Wow.
And it was super slow. And nobody was recommended to use it. Then they did 10.1 the next year, and I actually thought the 10.1, that was the first time that I officially moved over and used macOS 10 the whole, like, every day, all day, was 10.1. And even then it was really right on the edge, but you could do it. So it was a real transition. And that, they made the classic compatibility layer, which was essentially you could run old apps in classic macOS on top of OS 10. And that kept them for a little while. And it wasn't really until Steve did his little funeral for macOS 10, for macOS 9, where they brought out the macOS 9 casket and everything. And that was WWDC 2002. So that was the moment, 2.5 years later, where Apple really just said, guys, it's over. It's over. Stop with classic macOS.
And this is when the big cats began. This was Puma, to be followed by Jaguar.
Yeah, they weren't
Steve
originally
said it weird.
They were originally code names that nobody knew, and then they started just using them in the marketing, which was kind of
right. Yeah, Puma was secret code name. Yep. I do have one story I'll mention. Back when Steve was out in the wilderness, still working at Next in 1995, I think it was, I got to hang out with him a little bit for a weekend, and I remember him vividly saying, and this is a little bit bitter because he's not at Apple yet. They haven't started the conversations. We had a 10-year lead on Microsoft with the Macintosh, and we blew it. In 84, they had a 10-year lead. By 1995, Windows 95 came out. He said there was no reason to buy a Macintosh. And remember, he's not at Apple. But I think even then, in his mind, he's thinking, how do we get rid of, how do we put Next Step in the Macintosh?
Yeah.
And it was a very smart move on Apple's part. They did the right thing. Great to have you all on this very special birthday. Jason Snell, thank you for writing that article and getting James Thompson to put down his thoughts. I didn't realize that was your
whole
idea.
chain of events that had to happen.
Very good idea. I was really pleased to read that. Jason Snell, of course, 6colors.com, Andy Anako, WGBH Boston, from officehours.global. Alex Lindsay, ladies and gentlemen, your MacBreak Weekly crew. Our show today brought to you by Zscaler. You've probably heard people talk about zero trust. This is the way to protect yourself in the modern age. Zscaler is the leader in cloud security. Problem is that enterprises have spent billions of dollars, maybe yours has too, on firewalls and VPNs, but breaches continue to rise. 18% increase year over year in ransomware attacks last year. And I think this is an underreported figure, $75 million in ransomware paid in 2024. I'm sure it's twice that. These people just aren't admitting it. The problem is that traditional security tools, perimeter security tools, really don't help. They expand, in fact, your attack surface with public-facing IP addresses exploited by bad actors more easily than ever nowadays with their AI tools. And those perimeter defenses can't really, they struggle to inspect the encrypted traffic going out of your system at scale, which means it's much easier for these bad guys to exfiltrate all of that private information. We see it in the headlines, breach after breach after breach. How do they do it? Well, they get through your perimeter defenses. VPNs and firewalls have another problem. They enable lateral movement because as soon as you're connected to the network, you can go anywhere. Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Hackers, this is really the bottom line, exploit traditional security infrastructure, and they're doing it better than ever now with AI to outpace your defenses. It is time to rethink your security, to stop bad actors in their tracks, because they're innovating, they're exploiting your defenses. You need to get smart. You need Zscaler, Zero Trust plus AI. Now you've got it on your side. It helps you. It hides your attack surface, so apps and IP addresses completely invisible. It eliminates lateral movement, connecting users only to specific apps, not the entire network, and even better, it continuously verifies every request based on identity and context. That's the whole idea behind Zero Trust. Trust no one. Even if they're in the network, trust no one. They have to have explicit permission. Zscaler, Zero Trust plus AI simplifies security management with AI-powered automation, detects threats using AI to analyze 500 billion daily transactions. A human couldn't analyze 500 billion transactions a day, but AI can do it and give you actionable insights. Look, hackers can't attack what they can't see. Protect your organization with Zscaler, Zero Trust plus AI. Learn more at zscaler.com/security. Please use that address. That way they'll know you saw it here. Zscaler.com/security. We're really great product. And we thank them for supporting MacBreak Weekly. You do the same when you use that address, zscaler.com/security. Speaking of security, Apple has agreed to pay a $95 million fine. Actually, the fine is de minimis from Apple's point of view. I mean, that's pocket change. That's in Tim Cook's couch. But, and by the way, you may get as much as $20 each for up to 5 in Siri-enabled devices. So $100, that might be not pocket change to you. The point more is that Apple is, after 5 years, finally kind of said, well, all right, they don't admit any wrongdoing, but the settlement refers to, and this is what you want to know, the actionable thing, unintentional Siri activations that occurred after Hey Siri back in 2014 and later. Recordings were apparently prompted without users ever saying, hey, you know who. And I'm sorry, I activated. I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. Hey, you know who.
Shlomo.
Sometimes Shlomo would be inadvertently activated.
Yeah.
A whistleblower told The Guardian when an Apple Watch was raised. Actually, I turned that feature off pretty darn quick. And worse, it seems Siri might have sent that out to marketing people.
Wrong.
No?
No, that's an allegation that is never supported.
Apple denies it.
And there's no way that happened. That this is the phantom thing. It's the fake conspiracy theory. That
I've been talking about breadsticks all day, and now I'm getting an Olive Garden ad.
It's people who don't understand how good internet tracking is.
They don't need to listen to Siri.
They don't need to listen. And also Apple, Apple doesn't even know what apps you want in the App Store, and they're gonna perfectly target. Like, that's not gonna happen. Apple said unequivocally, told Ars Technica, Siri data has never been used to build marketing profiles. It's never been sold to anyone for any purpose. Yeah. And they said Apple settled to avoid additional litigation. We just want to get on. And this is the story that we all talked about before. I mean, this was actually a few years ago now, right? But it's the idea that they used to have a human crew of people who would listen to activations as part of their quality for Siri. But it meant, and then there was the story about how those things were being shared among the people in that human group, where there would be an activation and people would be having sex and you could hear it in the background. And they'd it was like high school. They were basically sharing these audio clips around, and Apple had to apologize profusely and actually put a feature in that's still in there. If you ever gotten that warning that is would you like to improve Siri by sharing audio? That was the feature that was added because of this, where you could say, no, I do not want to share my audio files with Siri. So there obviously Apple made some mistakes here, and they're paying a very small amount of money for it, to be honest. But let's not get that one statement that's in there is never corroborated. There's no evidence about it. It is going to feed every conspiracy theory. And seriously, the fact that people want to believe that assistants are listening to them and feeding all that information so that you can be profiled the next time you open a web page, versus the very clear way that people are profiled and tracked in our world today. The fact that people would rather believe that it's Siri listening to them than that everybody knows everything about you without needing to listen to you. I find it kind of baffling, but there we are.
I was talking to someone who works on that algorithm for a network, and not Apple, somewhere else that does a lot of it, where you think that they can hear you. And they said, the idea of using the audio is just so inefficient. He said it would be such a mess. He said no one uses that. He goes, the person, I can tell whether you're standing next to somebody and whether you're talking to them, because your body and their body move in a certain way with the accelerometers. When you're standing and talking to someone or interacting with them, there's these things that we know. So we know the two of them. As soon as we link the two of you, I know all the information that they searched, that they bought at Safeway 10 minutes before, that they did all that. I have all that data. And so I can guess really quickly what they're talking about, because this is all on top of mind for them. And, oftentimes people are doing the best thing, which is searching while they're talking, they're talking and they're searching some item or whatever, and they don't, as you said, it's so invisible. People don't even know that they're doing it. You're constantly asking Google for something or figuring something out while you're talking to someone, what is that? Where did that come from? Whatever. And you forget that you even did that. He goes, but the idea that we would use audio, he said that would just grind our servers to the ground. He goes, he was like, even the NSA doesn't use it.
Well, all right. I'm going to pause here because I would contend otherwise. But I don't think Apple does it. I don't think Google does it. And I don't think Amazon does it.
Just that the metadata,
I think your
is so
smart
much more
TV
powerful.
does do it. I think your smart TV, which has a microphone and a camera and has a lot of incentive. That's why TVs are so cheap, to send this stuff back.
I don't
and
think
with AI, you could do. The NSA does it with Echelon. They've admitted it. They're looking for keywords. The AI could do that too.
I don't think they're listening. The smart TVs are listening to what you say in your room as much as they're just watching what you watch and are able to infer everything about you from what you watch.
Well, and you should never connect your TV to the internet.
No, don't do it.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
We've never had
so many
proof.
Reasons.
And I think there probably are people out there who are packet sniffing and looking at what's going back, although it's hard to see because it may be encrypted. It may be, in some way parsed before it goes out on the network. You probably don't want to send the audio of the conversation out. Let's face it. But cars and TVs, I think continually we cause concern because both manufacturers of cars and TVs in their privacy statements say we could if we wanted to. Yeah. Secondly, Cox, and I bet others there are companies out there marketing this ability to target using audio from consumers. Now, they may be lying. I mean, God knows.
My guess is that it's not content. My guess is that it's things like they've got an algorithm that will predict the number of people in the household and the gender and the age.
We know they're doing that,
right?
Obviously.
I'm not sure they're transcribing
in that
what
Cox
they're saying.
marketing material, they said, we hear what people are saying and we know what they're talking about.
All right.
They specifically say that. Now,
I'm not sure I believe them. I think that
I don't
might be
sure I believe them
BS,
because nobody lies more than salespeople. So I have a feeling that that's more them pitching their non-existent services. However, there's
no trust. Zero trust.
There's no reason to trust them.
No.
And there's no reason to trust the TV makers or the car makers.
No.
So, well, and it's not just that. It's just that the worst part is that the technology that you're getting is so bad for that internet. You know, the chips, I mean, I have to, you know, so when I build streams, we have to dumb down all of our stuff for these stupid TVs, you know, because their chipsets are so bad, you know, and I have to admit, it's a luxury. I stream a lot of stuff to Apple TV. The Apple TV is by far, I mean, there's not any other chipset that's close to the Apple TV from a power perspective. So you can throw anything at it and it just will do anything over the last 5 years, it'll just crank through whatever you're sending it. But when you deal with these TVs, you realize because we look at the chipsets because we have to figure out what can we deliver to those TVs. And we have to dumb everything down so much because they're just such cheap pieces of electronics. And the same thing in the cars, you know, it's a cheap piece of electronic. Like I just got a new radio for my car, and you know, I have a very old car. I'm not a car guy, and I replaced the radio because the headphone jack was broken. That's all I cared about was, can my iPhone connect to my headphone jack? And the headphone jack finally gave out, so I paid $100 and some and bought one with a new screen on it and everything else. It doesn't know how to do anything other than play music, but I hook it up and it does Bluetooth to my phone, and it looks better than it looks better than most you know, just the CarPlay makes the whole thing work, you know. And so, you know, Apple's ability to build all this stuff up, or other people, I mean, Google's making great stuff with some of the Android tools as well. But what I would say is that the stuff that's built into the cars and the stuff that's built into your TVs is not worth the trouble. Like, you should just disconnect as much of that as you can, because you're giving up a bunch of privacy for, you know, fast food at best, you know, badly made fast food.
Yeah, and the damage that can do to you, they're selling that information to insurance companies. So God forbid, like, you actually have to make a claim. If it's a serious enough claim, they can just basically buy information from your car maker saying, yeah, but you know what, we did an analysis and you tend to brake a lot more stiffly than 18% of the, so we're going to, you know, it's
well,
bad.
and I would say the one that's more apparent is that they charge you differently for your flights. They charge you different. They're using that profile to decide, oh, you're the kind of person that would pay more for your flight than somebody else. And so you're not even seeing the same price. We're getting to the point where you're not seeing the same prices if they decide that you're that kind of person. And that's, you know, and so it's not even something that's theoretical or it might happen at some point when you re-up. It's happening every single day when you're on there, and you know, it's known that it's known that you get a better price if you're accessing the app or the hotel chain or whatever from an Android phone than from an iPhone. So yeah.
It's very difficult to separate. I mean, there are people now in our chat saying, you know, I was, this is my favorite. I was talking about pierogi Christmas tree ornaments during the day, and I got ads for pierogi Christmas tree ornaments that night. That you hear that all the time. I hear it from all normals. Absolutely believe this is happening, and I guess what I try to say is and I think this is what you were saying, Jason. They don't really need to listen to what you're saying because they already know so much about you.
I mean,
if they could, they would. But it's
like trying to avoid microplastics. Like, okay, but what bubble that has been unsealed since 1803 are you going to live in now? So
well, and they know that it's Christmas time. They know that at some point you bought those pierogi.
They know you love pierogies, right? Yeah,
I know,
but you probably observe Little Christmas because pierogies are what I had on Little Christmas. Yes,
or the pierogi ornaments are somebody that you know, or someone that you, or maybe you ordered them somewhere in the past and now it's the right time, you know, for you to do that.
You can explain it. Absolutely.
I mean, even just
Explain.
positional data, they know that you're walking around in a way that would be what you do when you put things on the Christmas tree. That's
Here's the thing, though, that does make people, I think, reasonably nervous is the capacity of computing of the cloud and with AI has increased so exponentially over the last 10 years that marketers can do so much more with this data than they could ever do. And that's why it seems like magic. But I think people should reasonably be afraid of what people are doing with AI and this vast volume of data. The NSA didn't build that giant data center in the Midwest because they could crack encryption. They just figured down the road we'll be able to. Yeah. And so all this is being collected, has always been collected, and now they really have some powerful tools.
Yeah, that's why it's absolutely imperative that collectively society decides that we are going to make this a priority for our lawmakers. That we need a set of laws enforceable that basically protect personal private user information. I've always wanted a framework that basically says that your private, here are some specific categories of information that belong to you, and ownership cannot be transferred to any other entity under any reason. It can be leased, but it cannot be transferred, which would create a requirement to say that every year or so, whether they do it in a lame way or in a legitimate way, they have to basically renew that lease with you in a direct and specific way. But unless there are consequences, you fall afoul of what I always refer to as the big bag of money on the table phenomenon, where if there's a big bag of money on the table and a sign on it saying it is not illegal to take this bag of money and take it home with you, people are going to take that big bag of money.
When do we get to despair of this, Andy? Because I don't think it's ever going to happen any more than we're going to get money out of politics.
Well,
they're just some fundamental structural problems here that every clear-minded person knows are a problem.
Yeah.
But because of money and because of the power that billionaires and marketers and these oligarchs have, we're never going to see any reasonable privacy.
Yeah. Well, the only thing, I don't know what we can do. The only thing we can't do is give up. Because soon as that's what you're saying. The modus operandi of the devil, metaphorically speaking, is to lower our standards until we don't care anymore. And
I read the screw tape letters. I know.
actually, I was more quoting broadcast news, Albert Brooks.
But it started with C.S. Lewis. I promise.
It's good philosophy. Yeah.
If you want to know the devil's ways, the screw tape letters is hysterical.
Yes.
Anyway, and there's a John Cleese version of it on Audible that I really enjoy. But anyway.
I think that it is typically when these kinds of things happen, that when people start to have a lot of friction or start to have it upset or start to become conscious to it, it also, beyond the government, provides market opportunities for a new way of doing things. And I think
that's an interesting point. That's what Tim Berners-Lee is trying to do with Solid. Yeah.
And that turns into disruption. Like when you see disruption, a lot of times it's people being built up and more frustrated with something. Someone comes in with something that solves that itch that's become, intolerable. Suddenly everybody jumps over it. And that's when you see something happen really quickly. Suddenly everyone moves over to something else. And so, I think the government may be able to do something about it. I think it's actually going to be more likely that someone, I think that there's an opening for social media. Someone's going to build a human-only social media that requires you to biometrically log in all the time, that is not going to allow any bots, that's going to, and it'll be a little harder to communicate. It won't be as automated. There won't be any automated posts. There won't be any way to do, it's going to have to be you. And I think that kind of thing is going to crop up because people are so tired of what, that half of Meta is, half of it is bots now, which they said, right? Half of Facebook is going to be bots.
Do you feel like, though, that maybe we're just the tin hat wearing?
I don't think. I think that we're talking
minority, right?
I guess what I would say is we are consciously talking about it, but I think that when you look at depression rates, when you look at upset, when you look at this, it's affecting everyone.
Yeah.
And they're just not, they're not conscious to it. But it's affecting, a lot of people, and I think that, we become more, as a group, we oftentimes become more sensitive to this. We become more sensitive to, for instance, right now, ultra processed foods having a moment, where suddenly everyone's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be eating everything out of a box. So and there's a whole bunch of market opportunities that are occurring underneath all of that. And I think that, so what happens is that I think a lot of folks, we see these snaps. Does it fix everything? Probably not. But I think that you will, I think, and I also think that that's why, as Apple user, a lot of times I want Apple to keep on tightening all those bolts. I want them to say, I don't want to share the third parties. I want them to be able to, I want to keep having them close that stuff down. Because, I think that
but how do you explain that there's still hundreds of millions of people using X? I mean, I think you're an optimist, I guess is what I would say, Alex. You're a wide-eyed optimist. You hope someday.
But I think that it's to take Elon Musk for a moment.
Maybe I'm a cynic.
Is that everyone was really resigned about that there's no way you could build an electric car until Tesla came out. True. And so it's just he took advantage of a moment that people were paying attention to that and didn't try to have us eat broccoli to do it. He just said, we're going to make something that's cooler that happens to be electric. And so that, so I think that shows you where there's weak points in a lot of these things. And I think that, again,
but to bring it back full circle, there is no car made today that spies on you more than your Tesla.
Yeah, I don't have a Tesla, so I don't know.
I can tell you for a fact.
I have a 10-year-old Dodge Caravan that I had to pull by the radio that the headphone jack broke on. So
you're smart. And by the way, you said I'm not a car guy. Car guys all own old cars. Car guys love old cars.
I have an enclosed truck. That's how I look at it, because I can put all the seats down. I literally have a 4x8 piece of plywood that just sits on it until someone has to get into it. Every once in a while, you have to open the windows because it smells bad if it gets wet. So but outside of that, I'm a country boy with a truck that I can close I can close the top on. And but I do look at some of the newer cars and I do think about, oh my gosh, there'll be a lot of tracking going on that I don't deal with. I also don't put a lot of miles on cars. I don't drive that much.
Yeah. We're going to take a little break, come back. I'm sure there's other things to talk about, and we will find them and talk about them with MacBreak Weekly, Andy Anako, Alex Lindsay, Jason Snell. Our show today brought to you by Melissa, the trusted data quality expert, and they've been doing this longer than we've been doing this, since 1985. Since the Mac came out. With Melissa's debut in the Stripe app marketplace, Stripe customers now have access to the same data quality services leveraged by large global enterprises every day. Key features of Melissa's Stripe integration include address validation. This is where addresses get munged up, is when your customer or your customer service rep is entering in an address and flips numbers or gets the phone number wrong or the email wrong. Melissa's app validates global addresses at the customer and the invoice level within Stripe. In fact, they do it with auto-completion. So you reduce the number of keystrokes required and ensure that only valid addresses enter your database. If you use Stripe, you want this, right? How about user-friendly configuration? Stripe users can easily configure the app with a few steps, and there's support not only for the invoice level validation, but for the customer account as well. It also helps with subscription management. Melissa and the Stripe app offers smooth management of API keys and subscriptions, facilitating transitions from free to paid services. And of course, you get comprehensive support and quality assurance. Users have direct access to Melissa's experts, ensuring the best service and the best support. Melissa is really the best at doing this. And the ability to integrate it directly into your apps, whether it's Stripe or any of hundreds of other apps, is fantastic. It enhances operational efficiency, it boosts customer satisfaction, and it helps you maintain overall financial health. These should be goals for any forward-thinking business. If you rely on Stripe, you need this ever-expanding tool set at the ready with Melissa. So take a look at Melissa integration. Melissa's services understand compliance like no other too, by the way. With Melissa, you'll get secure encryption for all file transfers. It's an information ecosystem built on the ISO 27001 framework. They support GDPR policies, SOC 2 compliance. Of course, they treat your data like the gold that it is. Treat your data like gold. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free. Melissa.com/twit. MELISSA.com/twit. We thank Melissa for supporting us for so many years. They're back again in 2025. Welcome back, Melissa. We really appreciate the support. Melissa.com/twit. Do we care why Apple won't make a search engine? Eddie Q says it's economically risky to compete with Google. You know what the risk might be, though, and Apple actually filed a brief in this, is that they may lose their $20 billion or so a year from Google if the court rules that Google has to stop those payments. That's the real risk. This was part of that briefing that they filed with the Department of Justice.
Yeah, this is part of the remedy portion of the antitrust case against Google Search, where they lost the case. And now we spend lots of months with the DOJ and Google arguing about, okay, well, how do we remedy this?
Won't go on much longer. I think the judge has to decide soon, right?
Yeah, in a couple of months, I think.
Is it that long? Okay.
Not too long. And of course, the DOJ is asking essentially Google shut down everything, sell Chrome. One of the things that the DOJ is asking for is backing up one step, DOJ does not have the ability to make an order. They simply file a document with the judge saying, here's what we think will remedy the situation and restore balance to the force, so to speak. One of the things they want to do is Apple can no longer have any special deals with Apple that benefit Apple in any way. On that basis, Apple filed a brief basically saying that, hey, we think that this means that we get to be part of this conversation because now you're directly interfering with Apple's ability to do business. Because if you put a 10-year ban on Apple having an agreement with Google that benefits Apple, that means that not just with search, we can't support Android devices. We can't do links that go out to Google Docs. Anything that involves Google will short us out. And because Google, and this is, if you read the document, it's actually very, very very plain English, very easy to understand. They're saying that because Google has more than their hands full worrying about themselves, Apple, they're not going to worry about protecting Apple's interests. So we have a very important interest in being able to have a voice in this conversation.
Yeah. The development of this is what Eddie wrote in the filing with the federal court last week. It says his name. I don't think Eddie really wrote it. Eddie, the lawyers who talked to Eddie wrote this. The development of a search engine would cost Apple billions of dollars and take many years, diverting investment money and employees away from other growth areas. It would hurt us, Your Honor. The search business is rapidly evolving. That I'll admit to, due to artificial intelligence. So it would be economically risky for Apple to create a search engine. That's probably true.
I just don't. I think that sometimes we get into this thing where we get antitrust by the time something's ending, and for Google,
exactly.
I think
search is ending.
About this,
Exactly.
I spend way more time asking ChatGPT or Claude or Sonnet or whatever questions than I do Google search now. I mean, the Google search, the summaries are pretty good, but outside of that, I find that I get my answer much faster with ChatGPT, and so I'm using
Arc now, which uses Perplexity, and it summarizes search results much better. I very rarely now.
Also, Google has. I'm sorry, Alex, I interrupted you.
All I was going to say is that I think that number one is I don't think this has gone to the Supreme Court yet, so we don't know what unless they actually force them to do something. This is still a couple of years away, maybe all the years away. And by the time they get to the Supreme Court, will search still be a thing at the level that it is now? Number two is that, we're about to have a new DOJ. Are they going to continue to fight it? So if it goes into
at this point, I think it's up to the court, right? I mean,
if it got
DOJ, can he go to the court and say, hey, Your Honor, because it's done. It's a done deal.
If it gets it hasn't gone to the Supreme Court.
They don't have to defend an appeal.
They could just say that if they appealed it, the DOJ could decide not to move forward. They could just go, this is not.
Oh, you're right.
It's not about it. So in the next 4 years,
that explains why Tim Cook put $1 million down on the inaugural ball.
That's why everyone's putting. It's pretty transactional. This one, I think Trump's a lot easier to calculate for when it comes to will it make a difference? So,
it's much easier. It's much simpler.
Yeah.
No guessing involved at all.
Yeah. But this could affect Google search because they're putting together so many products that leverage off of essentially the Google search product. They have a brand new, the marketing hype that they're putting together for AI in 2025 is now they're going to move the Gemini model into agentive, what they're calling AI, which is stuff that actually uses other tools and apps to do things for you. And one of the first things they introduced to people who are paid subscribers are essentially research this topic for me on Google search. And here's what I'm interested in. Here's your parameters. And it will come back not just with a Google search, not just with a search summary, but here is a couple of pages on this topic and a whole list of here are web pages to take a look at for more exploration. And if you say, refine this, I really want you to tell me more about Paris in the 1890s. So if Google is barred from using Google search, not only will it bar that, it will also bar them offering Google Search as a product to essentially double check other people's AIs, which is another service that they're trying to offer through Google Search for developers. It's a moving target, and it is a very, very complicated thing. And yeah, it's $1 million seems like a small amount of money to pay.
Yeah, as a user, I guess the question is like, is this going to make my life any better? I don't know if it will. Like, I don't know if breaking this up is going to make going to make my search any better. Like, I just don't think that. Sometimes I think we go down this path, and it's like Google search is so much better than everybody else's search. Like, it's not really. I don't feel like it's close. I try other ones, so they're.
Well, that's why the argument, if you're going to still use search, is in fact the best remedy for this is for Google to be forced to freely license its search index. I use Kagi. I actually pay money to use Kagi, and they use, in a very kind of clever derivative way, the Google results along with other results, and it gets the benefit of all the Google index without the Google ads, without the Google algorithmic placing of its own properties up at the top. And I haven't used Google in ages. I stopped using it a long time ago. The problem is Google's still in there, right? And so what the judge has to do, I think, is tell Google, look, you got to give companies like Kagi access to your index at either a reasonable fee or no fee. No fee would be a punishment, right?
Yeah. Go ahead. And that's one of the remedies that the DOJ is proposing.
They did propose that, and I think that's the one.
It's a long list of. Obviously, this is like, well, how much my car got dented? How much you dented my car? How much do you? I'm sorry. Your car got dented by my construction company. Like, how much do you think you should get in compensation? You started $1 million and you negotiate down, because you ask for everything knowing that you're going to have to settle for what you settled for. The problem is that Google is the word that people use for searching something on the internet. It's like, that's how popular it is. And this is another one of those things where people in this conversation might understand that there are other tools that, if nothing else, give you a different perspective, a different ranking of search results. People still, Google is simply the concierge to the internet for the entire world.
This might be one case where Alex's thesis of the market changing things might actually hold. I talk to normal people who are dissatisfied with Google's results. Yeah. I hear that a lot.
I 100% agree with Alex on this point, because the Meta's ruling was so bizarre when you read it, because almost every paragraph could have been used in a billboard ad for Google search. Okay, because everything that he was saying said that it is the best.
It assumed the ascendancy.
It's what everybody wants to use, and it's not because they're being unfair. It's because it legitimately is the best. Other companies don't want to compete with them because it would cost. They don't want to start 20 years of research and spending on it, on and on and on and on and on. Nonetheless, we feel as though they're abusing their market power, and so we're going to have to fix it. It's not like I thought that the big deal. I thought that the search was going to be something. Either a win, a minor win at best. I thought there would be something that the DOJ would have to appeal really to get a win on. I thought that, they still got the ad business antitrust suit over their heads, and that's where they're going to absolutely get destroyed. I don't think that anybody is benefited by breaking up Google search. I do think there could be a benefit by giving third-party searches and third-party tools access to their search rankings, not the algorithm, but at least what is the value of this link as a result for these words, and get that information back and use that to build like a cooking search engine, an academic search engine. That I think is more within the ballpark of what's good for the market and what's good for users.
I guess I think it would still be like noise. Like, the number of people that would do that would be noise. Like, and I think that it is, and I think the era of the government, trying to fix remedy all these things is probably over. And so, I think that was a moment like that the government had to do that. And I think they still have to get to the Supreme Court. I don't think the Supreme Court is the kind of court that's going to think that this is a good idea. So I think that this is the current, it could change, and there's lots of things that can change. So, but if it hits over the next 3 or 4 years, I think that the chances of it succeeding at the level that the DOJ is asking for, if the DOJ continues to appeal it, which will be in question, because, it's not going to be Google, because I don't think that Trump cares about Google, but it might be, Tim Apple talking to, whispering, like, hey, this is dumb, like let's not do this. And so I think that I just don't think that there's any And again, I don't know if it's relevant. I guess I'd probably think more about it if I thought that search had a future, but I just don't see what the future is my whole family just sits there and finds things on ChatGPT all the time. Like it's just like a constant, like there's not
and TikTok and
TikTok
is a search engine for the young.
When I needed to figure out how to do something pretty complex in DaVinci Resolve through 3 pieces of hardware to output to a stream. And all I did is ask ChatGPT how to do it and just ask one piece after the other. I can't find, it was such a weird connection there. I couldn't find that on the internet. Like I started in Google, and then it's in that moment 6 months ago or whatever, just changed everything for me, which is that I start with ChatGPT, and if I'm not sure, then I go to Google. But I rarely, I mean, like now, and I'm someone who, we used to joke that in our family, it's not what you know, it's how well you Google. Like it's, and that all that information was out there. We don't need to figure it out. Yeah. And now I'm using Sonnet for other things, and I just feel like I can go a whole day now as someone who used to Google 5 or 10 times an hour, at least. I now can go a whole day without opening Google. I think we're sitting there building all this legislative stuff around something that I don't know how relevant it is. I think they are worried that they don't know how relevant it is. And I think that now starting to weight it down with a bunch of legislation when I think Google's going to be fighting for its existence because Google search and Google AdWords, nothing else at Google really works. I disagree with that. It's like nothing else makes money. Like nothing else makes money like ad. Like I used to, I've been at a lot of Google events, and I can tell you can tell when you're at a Google ad event because it's like the money spent on it for the big thing is like looking into the sun. Like it, and when you look at what they're doing, but the only thing that's really generating lots of money at Google is ads. Or is the Google search and display ads and YouTube, and so I think that this disruption that's happening with AI around search is the end of search. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen it's going to, and so I didn't think that until 6 months ago when I started asking complex questions. I'm writing whole apps without having to open, without having to know how to code. And when you do all of that, I used to Google all of that to try to figure it all out, and I just don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I still think that most people's first point of access is Google. For myself, I mean, for instance, for reasons not unrelated to Tim Cook's alleged $1 million donation to Trump's inauguration fund, I had to learn a whole lot about the Federal Election Commission and how donations are registered and that sort of stuff. And the first place I went to was Google Gemini, just to ask for a broad, what do I need to know? The next step was to Google search to find, okay, now I know I need to find Form FE-13 for each of these election commissions. I also need to know what names these election commissions are registered under. And that's when ChatGPT, all these search bots, A, are not going to produce the results that I wanted, and B, if they did, I would have to run that back through Google search anyway because I wouldn't trust it. The AI is not a place where you trust any fact that it gives it at this point. It's really good at sending you on the right direction, giving you that overview for things that you can verify yourself, but it's not something that I would use that way. All I'm saying is that Google has a plan that goes beyond simply Google search. It involves keeping that monetized. And lastly, yeah, you're absolutely right. The ad business is to Google/Alphabet what the iPhone business is to Apple. It's roughly the same percentage of their revenue. And if something were to destroy that market, they'd be in super, super big trouble. And for the record, Google has fewer great, successful, profitable bets than Apple does. Google Cloud is working extremely well, but it's still in the launch phase. And the thing is, the appetite for iPhone sales is not going to go down anytime soon, and Apple has plenty of time. Whereas if in 2 or 3 years, Google has to find a way to replace 53% of its annual revenue, I don't think they're in a position to do that right now. So
I guess what I would say is that also that that no other search it doesn't make sense to go into the search business now, or to even try to if Google suddenly is disrupted or told that it has to do all these things, that's just not a good business for other people to get into. Not just Google's. They're the best at what they're doing, but you're in a deteriorating market. Why would you it's not a good. I just don't know if it's a good.
I disagree, and that's all I have to say.
No.
BBC says Apple has been urged to withdraw out of control AI news alerts. Urged by the BBC, I believe, but
Yes.
They left that out of the headline. You wrote a good piece, Jason, on how you were taught back in the day how to write headlines.
Back in my day,
that created clicks, but did it without hiding information.
So the problem is there's a lot going on here. So the BBC has had its apps push notifications summarized by Apple Intelligence, and what gets created is things that are factually untrue. And the problem is, and Apple has said that they'll address it, but it sounds like they're going to put a more prominent warning label on it, which is not the same as saying
people
we're
are
going to
dumb
fix
and
it.
don't understand what the feature works like.
The warning would be like, we made this up, but here's what we think the BBC is saying.
There are a lot of things going on here. Part of the problem here is that what Apple is doing is summarizing a summary. They're summarizing if not a headline, a push notification text written by somebody that's being sent out through the BBC app. And it depends. Some of those are automated. Sometimes the people who write the headlines write the push notification text. Sometimes it is the headline. Doesn't matter. It is a summary made by a human. And then what Apple is doing apparently is throwing all of these summaries in a bin, all together into their LLM and saying, summarize this. And the problem there is that you get weird crossover, you get misparsing of phrases, and it's an LLM. But the challenge here is that you end up with things that are not factual. And the BBC has been making noise about this because it keeps happening where there was a headline that was like the shooting suspect of that healthcare CEO had made some gestures and stuff as he was being led into court. And Apple took shooting suspect and the guy's name and turned it into that he was shot. Because it misread and it's using
a big difference. So
my complaints about modern headlines being bad are there was a company called Artifact that went under that they had an app where you could actually mark a headline as clickbait and have the AI rewrite
Artifact.
it. And the AI rewritten
really
headlines
sad about it. Yeah.
The AI rewritten headlines were pretty good, but the thing is, and this is a key point, the AI headlines were based on the story text. And here, Apple is rewriting a summary of a story. It is a summary of a summary. And of course, it's going to do a bad job with that. So the question is, in the long run, first off, I think this is an effect of Apple rushing Apple Intelligence forward, because I think there are ways you could do this in terms of classifying the push notification as being a news app or something else, changing the behavior of summarization. Maybe you ask the news app to supply more information and you summarize that rather than just
Apple using the on-device model to do this?
Yeah,
so that's part of the problem. This is kind of not a super smart model.
It is, but I think that if it had better data, it's not a stupid model. The problem is it's summarizing a summary,
right.
And so there's so little data for it to infer what's going on, and our human brains can do it.
Yeah,
and so Apple has not even responded to stuff like this before. So this response, which is very brief and very vague, saying we'll do some more labeling later. It's a start, but I think what really needs to happen is Apple needs to and they also said it's a beta, right? Which is fine. It is a beta, but it's a beta in a final version of an operating system, so that's already a little shaky, and it's heavily marketed. And they don't say in the marketing, but it's a beta, be careful. So I think Apple just needs to be more diligent here. And I think we all need to not be as understanding about the fact that Apple is trying to struggle to catch up here. Because 100%. The fact is, Apple is shipping a feature that takes news and a certain percentage of it turns it into things that didn't happen. And that's bad, right? That's bad. And we should say it's bad, and we should say they need to do better. And if they can't do better, they need to turn that feature off until they can do better. Bottom line, that's what they need to do.
Not only that, but this isn't Apple Intelligence. The notification that Apple Intelligence says, blah, 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 blah.
It's the BBC.
Here is the BBC says, and here's the logo for the BBC next to it. They are basically not only coming up with things that are not just a little wrong, but completely wrong.
Yep.
They're basically also putting other people on the hook for it. The BBC and others are very, very right to be miffed off about this. Yep. And I also think that it's super, super weak sauce for Apple to simply say, we'll be modifying how these things are notified. They need to, this is a broken feature. that spreads misinformation, and an era where misinformation online is one of the biggest crises that the news industry faces. They need to terminate this. They need to unplug this feature right now and come back with it in 18.3, 18.4. And I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, it's not just, they're not just, you can't hide behind, oh, well, we're still working on it. It is a beta. Not only are they putting it out as anybody who has the full version, the mainstream edition of the golden version of iOS can use this, but they're also, all their marketing is, wow, it's part of Apple Intelligence. It's magic and it makes everything better. Like, no, it doesn't. This feature is bad, bad, bad. You need to take responsibility for what it is doing and just basically turn it off. It's perfectly fine to this. You aren't the first organization that's had this problem with AI summaries of these kinds. It's certainly not to say nothing of how early you are in your adventure towards implementing AI. No harm, no, excuse me. It's not embarrassing or humiliating, but if you decide that, no, it's perfectly fine to keep this feature going, even though we know it can cause harm, that's not the responsible thing to do. They need to terminate this feature and come back to it later.
Fair enough. What's your prescription in that? You wrote a great article, by the way, and I appreciate the nod to Ben Folds, although I doubt very many people have got that.
Fred Jones. It's a deep cut. It's a Ben Folds deep cut. Thank you.
It's a wonderful, wonderful song. But what is your prescription? Maybe they could do what Artifact did.
Well, I think there are a lot of things they could do, and that the fact that they didn't is because they rushed the feature out, because they're rushing all of Apple Intelligence out. And that's why I think that we need to not cut them as much slack, because I think we need to say this isn't good enough. It isn't up to your standards. That they could classify those apps by what they're doing, and they could make a judgment and say, you know what, we're going to turn off summarization of news headlines now. Or they could do something like summarize each headline on its own and then put them together, because I think one of the things they may be doing is putting them together in a bushel and summarizing the bushel, and you end up getting kind of like leakage between headlines. I don't know that for sure. That's just a guess, is that they're feeding different headlines crossing over, which is also bad. They could also build something in where and again, this takes time because you got to work with developers and you got to work in the App Store, and you might need to build a new API. But like, I think it's a great idea. The reason I brought up the idea that you could summarize full articles is if the push comes with a URL as well as a payload, maybe you have your LLM go look at the URL and summarize that instead, because it is, and this was my point in my follow-up article, is LLMs are actually pretty good at writing headlines if you give them the whole article. If you give them 8,000 words or 4,000 words or even 1,000 words, they can do a pretty good job at writing you a headline. But when they're given 20 words or 10 words, all they're doing is rephrasing based on very little information. So I think that there are, from letting apps opt out, which I know that Apple doesn't want to do because it wants apps to take advantage of this feature, letting classes of apps like news apps opt out, or changing the rules of the game a little bit so that there's more information that they can glean for their summary. All of these are options. Some of them are harder to implement than others, but like, I think the problem is just you can't just throw this out there and say, okay, we got it. And I know it's a beta, but like, part of being a beta is that it's incumbent on the developer to take the feedback and make changes. And I think we risk Apple thinking they got away with this. And I think that's why the BBC shouting like this is really valuable, because it's them saying, this is not okay. You have a lot of work to do here. This is not how we want our content to be presented to our customers. And I think that's fair enough.
Independent press organizations are also calling for the same thing. So they're not, it's not a quiet problem.
And I know that this is going to sound basic. Where is this showing up? And the reason I ask is I don't ever see any
You've
summary.
probably turned off the AI summaries.
Yeah, if you have AI summaries turned on and you have a news app that feeds you lots of headlines, like the BBC app, if you opt to have them fed to you, then in the lock screen or in the notification center, instead of seeing a stack of headlines, you'll see a single notification bubble that will summarize with little semicolons in between a few of those headlines together, which again, as an idea of 10 push notifications have gone by, we're going to tell you what you really need to know in a really quick blurt. Like, that's okay. That's not a bad idea. The problem is when it says Rafael Nadal comes out as gay, when that's not the headline, that's not the story, it's not true. Right. But the BBC now is allegedly saying that because it's been filtered through
You
an
probably
AI
turned-
I realize
you
I'm
probably
just, I'm,
turned those,
I
turned those
don't,
off.
I don't have any notifications. on
It
any
doesn't
of
sound
them.
like you, does it? It doesn't sound like you.
Do
It's
you
like, no,
like
I don't
the,
want
are
anyone
we,
to ever
how,
talk to
what
me
is
ever.
what is our there's the by the way, the
never.
New York Times headline,
I never see that.
Trudeau will be the next Congress. I think that's pretty darn exciting. I just got that
Yeah.
one.
And
So-
it's
Good
not
for
just,
him.
and it's not just these summaries either. Remember that it's one of the things that the Apple Intelligence was supposed to benefit us for is that, hey, we're going to make sure that we're not going to give you alerts for every single email or message that you get. We'll make sure that the most important ones like get special alerts. But it's too dumb to know that, yeah, the reason why spammers put extremely lurid and attention-getting things like, oh my God, call me right now, is because it's because it's attention getting. And so great. So now spammers are getting at the top of my notifications outside of like my mom, my friends, my doctors. It's not good.
So how do we feel about it with notifications? I mean, messages notifications. They are also sometimes hysterically wrong, but I think it's not quite the same, right?
I wish they were better, but I think they have more context because they get to summarize the entire text of the message. So it's sometimes wrong.
We've seen some really crazy.
Absolutely. But I think that there's potential there for it to be useful, but it's not, and the stakes feel a little bit lower to me than
I like these. I mean, when I first turned it on, my Ring doorbell said there were multiple people at my front door. I got a little nervous until I realized, that's just a roll-up of all the different people that came and went over a 5-hour period.
Yeah.
It sounded like they were there with pitchforks and torches, and I should immediately bar the door, but that wasn't it. So you learn, it's funny. I think that one's useful. But the difference is it's not claiming to come from a news organization.
Yeah,
with
I really think that one of the simplest things they could do to at least partially address this is to simply say, guess what? Every notification that you get that's been filtered through Apple Intelligence has a special background on it. That is,
there you go.
Just give it a different shade of color that's
Siri
associated with
shimmer.
this.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. All right, let's take a little break. More to come. You're watching MacBreak Weekly on the Twit Podcasting Network. This is our. By the way, when did you start MacBreak, Alex?
It would have been, I think, this week in 2000. I think it's 2006
because it was Macworld Expo.
The Macworld Expo. We ran around with Emery Wells and Amber MacArthur and you and I, and we covered it. And then that week we recorded a whole bunch of episodes that took me a long time to put together.
So this is the 19th anniversary of MacBreak.
I think it is, yeah.
And it is, we are in our 20th anniversary for Twit in April. We've been doing this a long time, almost as long as you, Jason. It's pretty amazing. So happy birthday to us. Our show today brought to you by Cashfly. That's one of the reasons I ask is because practically since the beginning, we've been literally brought to you by Cashfly. You've heard me say it over and over. Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com. Actually, in the early days, I think I said AOL Radio, BitTorrent. I mean, we were trying everything. That's when Matt Levine from Cashfly came to me and said, can we help? For over 20 years, Cashfly has had the track record for high-performing, ultra-reliable content delivery, serving over 5,000 companies in over 80 countries. We're one of them. We've been using Cashfly as our content delivery network, our CDN, practically since the beginning. I mean, we love their lag-free video loading, their hyper-fast downloads, the friction-free site interactions. Cashfly is the only CDN built for throughput. In fact, they can do something I don't know anybody who can do this. Ultra low latency video streaming, less than 1 second latency to over 1 million concurrent users. They also, if you're a gaming company, they offer lightning fast gaming. Downloads are faster, zero lag, zero glitches, zero outages. If you've got images on your site or on your content, their mobile content optimization is automatic. It automatically optimizes the size of the images for every screen, so your content loads faster on any device. One of the things we loved about Cashfly is we didn't know exactly what our bandwidth was going to look like, where the peaks and valleys would be. They were very flexible with us, giving us month-to-month billing for as long as we needed. And then once we figured it all out, discounts for fixed terms. The point is, and this was something we really valued, you can design your own contract when you switch to Cashfly. Cashfly. Rich media content up to 158% faster than other major CDNs. You can shield your content in the cloud. We've been doing that for some years now, ensuring 100% cache hit ratio, no cache misses. And with Cashfly's elite managed packages, you're treated like a VIP, which, from Cashfly's point of view, you are. They'll assign a dedicated account manager who'll be with you from day one, making sure it's a smooth implementation. And of course, they're there 24/7 with reliable support whenever you need it. Learn how you can get your first month free. Cashfly.com/twit. That's CACHEFLY.com/twit. Real thanks to Cashfly. I think I'm doing Matt's podcasts in a few days. I have to check my calendar. I remember I'm doing that. It's coming up. All right. Strava integration into Fitness Plus. Nothing.
I don't exercise enough to have a comment on this.
I don't use Strava. Actually, I really like Fitness Plus as it is in Apple's activity. I've been using something called Gentler Streak, which is basically the same stuff Apple tells you, but in a nicer way. I like that.
I love all the Apple Health. I mean, I think that
it's
in
so
general,
valuable. It's so great.
My wife was kind of like, I don't want to watch. And then she said, do you have any of the old Apple Watches right around Christmas? So I very quickly got her 10. Like I just went and bought her, like, here, have a new one. I want to make sure you have a great experience. And she just loves it. Like she's going to go into the Apple store and like do the little tutorial on how to use it and all this other stuff. She just really enjoys it. But I think that the biggest thing is the health is the sense that I have all this biometric data, I have sleep data. I don't feel like if I go to swim and I don't have my watch, or if my watch battery died, if the battery ran low or whatever, I feel like the swim doesn't count. I have to go do something else. The tracking of that has been kind of amazing. Like, and just all of that, I think that that's the biggest. I think Apple had a lot of assumptions about what, I think we talked about it before, but what the watch would do, and what it's really done is timers and health. Are the two big. That's what that's the lock-in. I can't imagine using something else at this point. But I think their fitness stuff is great. I haven't found a space that I wanted to do. I've done it a little bit, but hadn't found a space that I really found was the right space to do it in. But I think that what's fun as a production person is to watch what happens when someone builds fitness videos where they used all the money.
Yeah.
Like the production value on the fitness was so high.
Well, they're going to have some Strava athletes in the fitness videos. I love the fitness videos.
There was a Apple newsroom mark. So it's this big enough that they decided to put a newsroom piece in it, in addition to a whole bunch of like little new features for Fitness Plus, such as pickleball. You can now pickleball now counts as
it should, for crying out loud. They got everything else.
Yes, for Strava. Do you get credit for like the fist fights you get into with tennis players as you're trying to use the same court? That should also count too, because that's very, very aerobic and manages your blood pressure and stress levels. But yeah, so the Strava stuff is that essentially there's integration between the fitness app and the Strava app. And also the Strava app can get access to data off of your phone that's fitness related and that content related. And also that they're having a whole bunch of Strava instructors available in like Apple's fitness offerings. So yeah, I mean, they're going where the money is. So they're services. They got to keep making as much money as they can from services by making Fitness Plus more attractive by hooking it up to the kind of the name, the only other name that you kind of think of when it comes to fitness services, it is Strava. So it's a high tide that can float both of those boats. I
have my there you go. There's Strava. It's usually mostly used by runners, I think, for training and so forth. I have my Go Gentler. I presume it's taking this from Apple Fitness. It can record dancing. So when I go out to dance, I turn on my Apple Watch. People think I'm a complete dork. Tai Chi. I turn on my Apple Watch when I'm doing my Tai Chi. It records a lot of those things. It's pretty cool. Adding more is always a good thing. Incidentally, there was a breakthrough. I know, Alex, you have said that the company that comes through with a way of doing non-invasive blood glucose monitoring is going to be very, very rich. University of Waterloo announced that they have now created a non-invasive continuous glucose monitor that would fit in a watch, uses radar. Now, I'm sure Apple came a calling almost immediately.
I was like,
press release
also
went
seen
out.
is a bunch of Apple executives having dinner.
And to
with them.
prevent this technology from benefiting anybody who doesn't buy Apple products, Apple decided to come in and write the check.
So we'll see. I mean, actually, this paper came out last year. So radar near field sensing using Metasurface for biomedical applications. Well, you might have missed that in your inbox, but
I don't know if it would have the same impact with almost any other manufacturer because the watch is so
it's everywhere,
ubiquitous now. Yeah. But if Apple
Massimo came calling too. They don't have the billions that Apple does.
Yeah, I think that if I was looking for the right deal, I would definitely do it with Apple. Well,
it's going to be whatever Massimo can afford plus. The piece says the team is currently working with industry partners to introduce the technology to be installed in the next generation of wearables. We have a minimum viable product that's already being used in clinical trials. That's the key, though, isn't it? To get the FDA approval.
And make sure it doesn't like turn your skin into leather.
By the way,
it's like being licked by a cat.
There's
for
a
10
smell
days,
of roasting meat
exactly.
As you wear your watch. Yeah, you don't really want that.
But I think that if Apple releases that watch again, for anybody like Dunkin' Donuts, I would definitely sell my stock. Like it's going to be, it's just going to for desserts and ultra processed foods. It's going to be apocalyptic. Like it is when people can see the data, when it's easy, it's on their watch and they can see their data. It changes the way you operate. Like it changes the way, like my watch definitely changes my behavior, and I, about a lot of things. And so I think that when people start to see their glucose levels and start connecting it with what they ate,
it's fantastic.
But there is an ethical component to this. Like it's nice to have enough money you can afford like an expensive phone. Nice to have enough money you can afford an expensive smartwatch. What about people who necessarily don't have that ability?
But
I think there's an ethical component if Apple were to decide that this is great technology, it's the only one that seems to work, we're going to make sure that this is absolutely exclusive to us, and Samsung can't get at it. Any other smartwatch manufacturer can't get at it. We want to make sure that if you want the revolutionary improvement in health that glucose monitoring constantly can provide, you have to buy an iPhone and you have to buy an Apple Watch. But that's where I start to have an ethical issue.
Yeah, with this. I think that the thing though is that what it's going to do is it's going to affect the entire discussion about food. So it won't be just the people who have the watches. It'll be that, like Atkins.
Only people on the watches will benefit though.
No, I think everyone will benefit from
in the long run because everyone's going to realize that eating ultra processed food is poison. Processed is poison, and they're going to get that really clear when suddenly a whole bunch of press people and all these people that are wearing the watches are posting on their social media about, look at what's happening to my thing. It's going to change how food is sold. It's going to change how, like Atkins did it. Well, wait till we have a lot of
folks. It didn't matter whether they
forever chemical detector in your watch. That's when you're going to really see some changes.
Can I just quickly? Well, actually, two things on that. All I will say is that imagine it's 1950 and Apple decided that it's going to buy the polio vaccine.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And we're going to have lots of press about how wonderful it is that when we beat polio, and people are aware of how communicable polio is. I'm not directly equating the two, but I think it's in the same broad category. Sometimes a technology is important enough that to say that, hey, we've got these, we're going to start the next WWDC keynote with a video about everyone's firsthand accounts about how their lives were saved and how they almost got, they're now on top of their health, and adding to that, well, by the way, we're going to need at least $1,000 out of you before we let anybody.
But here's the thing: is that's
not good. That's not. I
think that what's going to happen is people are going to become really conscious to it. I've talked to a couple of people who have glucose monitors because I'm looking at getting a glucose monitor, and they were like, the bottom line is that you take the glucose monitor, and what it does is it underlines for you that there's a whole bunch of foods that you already knew were bad for you that you shouldn't be eating it, and you shouldn't be eating it, and you just now see the results. He said, you can take the glucose monitor for a month or two and immediately know that all this stuff is bad.
Yeah, I wore one for about 8 months, and I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so the
by the way, it hasn't slowed me down, but I still eat bread and pasta, but I know now I'm killing myself. So that's the difference.
Exactly. Well, while you drink the wine and so
what can you do?
But I think that there's something about it when it's on a certain. A lot of things affect overall societal change when only a certain percentage have it. I don't think that I don't.
You
Number
make
one
your
is I don't
point,
know
though,
if
Alex.
Apple.
I understand that, but I think Andy has a good point too, which is
I just
it
don't. I
would be
wouldn't
bad
equate it
for
to polio
Apple to
vaccine.
lock
Like,
up
I
a
think that's
technology
pretty-
like that.
that's
Maybe,
kind of stretching.
and it's really going to be up to the University of Waterloo to make sure that they don't do, that they do something that's appropriate to society.
Well, funds
and
the
make
whole
it
university
available to
for the next
everybody.
century.
Or maybe the government puts these out. I know it's the problem is it's going to be expensive to make a device
Yeah.
that does
It's
this.
good.
I don't.
Right?
It'll put Apple in a real awkward position when inevitably, of course, someone has they have exclusive access to this technology, but the research is out there, and people and other or individuals and researchers and companies try to create another technology that uses that same system, and then Apple starts suing people, saying, "No, we're not going to allow you to have create
that's a
life-saving
problem.
equipment for other people."
Yeah, no, that's a
again,
problem.
not a good look for Apple, especially during those times of the year where they dust off that aluminium halo and put it on themselves and adjust that and say, "Gosh, thank goodness you're doing business with us and not Apple or not Facebook, huh?" Because we're the angels.
The battle between Massimo and Apple over the blood oximeter is really not in the same category, because knowing your blood glucose is a life or death thing compared to, I guess if you've got COVID, you want a good, but you can buy a cheap blood oximeter. I think you're right, Andy. I think it's something Apple should be aware of. And I would hope Apple would be smart enough to do the right thing.
Although on that other thing you said, though, did you see that there was a much overinflated research paper that came out where researchers were investigating fluoroelastomers' ability to get into the bloodstream, to get into the body through, and they said, "Oh gosh,
expensive watch band."
yeah, and a lot of this turned into headlines. Oh, is your Apple Watch actually killing you by introducing microplastics? And that's of course kind of nonsense. All they were saying is that they decided the researchers said that we don't think that anybody's really done this kind of research before, but yes, we did test like a dozen different straps. I think they, including. I don't know if they mentioned Apple specifically, because I can read the summary.
They said
but
the more expensive fluoroelastomer.
Yeah, exactly. They hinted at it, and they also mentioned that. Well, and also because you're sweating into this, that's going to increase the transfer. They didn't do any human studies. They basically just demonstrated that you can fluoroelastomers.
Get my phthalates like the normal way through my food. So
exactly,
I'm not too worried about my watch band. Hey, John Ashley is on vacation. He's in Japan. I hope he's having a great time. That means Anthony Nielsen is producing the show today. Anthony, I say this to wake you up because it would be a good time right now to play the Vision Pro theme.
Oh, that's the jingle. My bad. Hold on.
There's a theme and there's a jingle.
What do you know? It's time to talk the Vision Pro.
We don't really have any Vision Pro news today, except for mass production of micro LED displays will begin next year, says Foxconn. And I guess that's not going to be that'd be probably too expensive for a laptop or a tablet or even a phone, but it might make a lot of sense in a VR headset of various kinds.
There were a couple little pieces, but remember that back in October or something, there was a story about, there's basically evidence that perhaps Apple has stopped manufacturing new units because they have enough of a backlog that they feel as though they can fulfill all orders that they're going to get through 2025. And that was via a supply chain analyst who realized that, okay, well, they're not, these companies that were manufacturing displays for the Vision Pro are no longer manufacturing in that kind of volume. There are a couple of kind of interesting things from CES. NVIDIA, both of them through NVIDIA's keynote.
Oh, I thought this was a good news. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, Vision Pro is going to support NVIDIA's GeForce Now, which is their cloud gaming service. You're going to get
I've used it. It's quite good. Yeah.
It's really nice. So that's good.
It won't be a VR game because it'll just be a screen, as usual in your 100-inch screen in your Vision, but still.
So, and will be through Safari, not through an app, but that's something you weren't able to do before. Yeah. They also mentioned that last year, one of their big announcements was that they're creating this new AI platform for training humanoid robots. It's called Groot, GR00T.
As it should be. Yes.
And part of the system is that you can basically train this robot AI by example, by showing it video, by showing it things you captured. So one of the other things in the keynote, I think, was that now you can use the Vision Pro as a source of movement capture for training those robots. So researchers and professionals love them. It's a great hardware.
It was impressive. A lot of the announcements were impressive. Did you watch the whole keynote?
I haven't yet. It's literally on my laptop right now. I downloaded it this morning.
No, I was curious because I found myself, I was like, because I think Jensen's one of the best at it. But I still found myself skipping through the 12-minute version. I just still feel like the keynote era is over. Like when you have out there
maybe.
And the 12-minute
I don't understand why the CES era isn't over. The whole thing seems like an exercise.
Oh, I don't know.
Century.
I think that the presentations at CES are kind of worthless. The expo is actually really useful. I don't get to go this year. I'm too busy, but NAB, CES, NAM, a couple other ones. The big thing is that I think the real value is the expos, not so much I think that the actual sessions are old ideas, not old ideas that they're talking about, an old way of presenting them. We created these conferences when we didn't have video, and you had to come and watch something to actually get the knowledge. And we're way past that now. So I think that the actual sessions are kind of a waste of time, but the expo, the networking, the dinners, and the most importantly, the expo, when you go to the Chinese section of CES, you're just looking at the future because they're looking for brands to buy up the thing that they made and put their logo on it and sell it. And you're 2 years and you just walk 2 years into the future of things that are being created in the Japanese area and the Chinese area. But also you get to see all these little things. I mean, we see big announcements, but there's so much at CES that you get to kind of explore and see new technologies that aren't going to probably come out for sometimes 4 or 5 years. And they're sitting on some little 20 by 10 booth with some dude, talking, trying to get your attention. And so I think that there's a value to that. I think that the CES unveiled and a lot of the kind of the press events are probably more valuable than the larger event, but it's still. I think there's a reason to bring everybody together because we can go to there.
The chances to put people together and network is always very useful. Every year, with some exceptions, the most useful stuff is, as you say, like some Chinese or Japanese or Korean manufacturer who has this component that they have a manufacturing technique for a certain component, and they're trying to sell it not to consumers. They're trying to figure out that, hey, if you're building phones, here is a new way to build that illuminator. Here is a way to do a lens array, and that's the stuff where the stuff that you see like in every YouTube video about CES and every Good Morning Ottumwa, Iowa show, is your rice cooker old tech? I guess it doesn't do Bitcoin, does it? Well, that changes with a hot new product at CES. That stuff is garbage. But the stuff that is really interesting are these small companies that don't necessarily need PR. They're just there for the deal making.
Now, I will say that if the companies who go to CES spend as much on a company like Video Studio to stream about their products as they do on the booth, it would probably die. Because these are like $2 million for $2 million and $7 million, and if you're cheap, $250,000. For most of these booths, a 10 by 20 booth is $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and with all the costs that are related to
without electricity.
Yeah. So the thing is that if they took that and the big reason that we need to go to CES to cover things is because no one will invest in their own video production systems at their own office, where they could do streams and talk about it, because otherwise we just have them call in and talk to them. But we have to go there because they don't have any things at the office.
I just don't think I've seen anything interesting at CES in years, but okay.
I haven't been there for years.
NVIDIA is now the king of CES. They're the ones who okay, well now you've got a $3,000 affordable Mac Mini style computer that can run multi-billion number models privately.
Speaking of NVIDIA, since we're still in the Vision Pro segment, they did say that the GeForce Now is going to come to Vision Pro.
You ain't mentioned that. You must have been asleep.
I'm sorry, I got swept away in all of the other weird conversations about, did we talk about the humanoid robots? I don't even want to talk about that.
No, let's not. So Apple, yes, you can now.
The question is GeForce Now, but no, you can't now. This is the thing. How? They said they're going to do it.
Safari.
You can't do it. Well, yeah, but GeForce now you've got to save the site as a web app bundle to the launch screen.
I don't think it's going to work.
And you can't do that on Vision OS now. So here, the theory is that hidden in the Vision OS 8, what is it, 2.3 or whatever beta, is a way, either a way to do that or some kind of like thing that they've worked with NVIDIA on to make it usable. It's interesting. It is, of course, the least interesting kind of gaming on the Vision Pro. It's just like from Apple's presentation about it, which is like, hey, gaming on the Vision Pro, hold a controller and play an iPad game. It's a little like that, but still, it's interesting that NVIDIA's been working with Apple. Apple's been working with NVIDIA. Somebody seems to be motivated to
Apple
have
Insider says
gaming.
NVIDIA says
Vision Pro.
players will be able to stream games to their headsets when the newest app update starts rolling out later in January.
Yeah, so this is the challenge: is what there's things that are not in Vision OS right now that are going to be required for that to work. But what's going on there?
And as a Vision Pro owner, I just have like zero interest. Like I just don't understand like a kind of a half-baked interface into something.
You can't play it on your Mac right now.
Games that
so
you
can
play on
presumably play it on your Mac and then watch your Mac on your Vision Pro.
I know people who do stuff like, late at night they're playing games using the Vision Pro because there's no light leakage and they can just sit there in bed and do that while their partner sleeps. And I think that there is why not, right? Why not?
I'm just saying it's a really small market. That I think that there are places that small market could be capitalized on. I just don't think that this one's going to be.
It seems
it's not difficult for NVIDIA to do. It's not difficult for
as long as it's not difficult.
You may as well have this thing that you can't have before. Again, if it's true, Apple has stopped manufacturing them because they figure, we've made about as much as we will ever sell ever. So let's, at least for the next year, so we will take anything we get while we work on the more successful version of this product.
I think there's a very viable market, and there are things that are very viable in the Apple Vision Pro. I'm just not sure that like repackaging cloud games is one of them. That's all. I think that there are things that I'm working on that I think when the new camera comes out, we're going to see a lot of things. I think that there's a lot of educational opportunities. I think there's a lot of gaming opportunities. Like I still think that some of the immersive stuff that we see on Meta on the Meta Quest is very engaging. Whether it's Supernatural or a lot of the Robo Recall, and there's things that in VR are amazing. It's just that I just feel like we're not seeing any of that on the Vision Pro. And I think that this is where the
money is not on that Vision Pro right now. Yeah.
Well, I think
if you loved John Chu's amazing movie Wicked, then you can thank the Vision Pro.
John Chu loves the Vision Pro.
He loves his Vision Pro.
Raving about it since the moment that it came out. He loves it so much.
He says he was using it in post production. He would watch the video on a giant virtual screen while he talked to other people working on the same project. For Wicked, he said, we have a lot of visual effects around the world. I could be at my house and I could have a screen that was bigger than the one in the screening room, and I could be talking to all the people in all the different continents, and I would watch the playback. It's still a crappy movie, but hey, Vision Pro was
But what
involved.
I will say is that the screen inside the Vision Pro is still the sharpest experience I have of any movie.
That's probably
why. So the thing is, if you wanted to look at visual effects, like a lot of times, until like when I worked on Star Wars, they would come in and look at everything, and they'd look at it on my little and approve the shot to go to film out based on a little screen that we're looking at, and then that would get filmed out and put onto a big screen to look at it. Well, you couldn't approve it until you have the big screen. I think that at this point, the vision. I have seen that screen, obviously, that we approve stuff for Star Wars, and I've seen Star Wars on my Vision Pro, and it would be easier to approve the shot on the Vision Pro than it would be on the screen. Do you think that
John Chu doing this promotional video for Apple TV about how he used the Vision Pro is the equivalent of paying $1 million for Trump's inauguration? Like, it's just John Chu doing something nice for Apple, hoping that they'll do something nice for him.
He loves the Vision Pro. He's a nerd. He's
wearing an Apple Watch too in the video. So
he is
everybody else,
super
like every other filmmaker.
Yeah,
that's true.
Like I think that
here he is in his house watching the playback. It's a moving moment. I don't know. I think maybe the movie would have been better if he didn't have a Vision Pro. That's just
we're all truth detecting you in the chat room, Leo.
Yeah,
88% Rotten Tomatoes score.
Were you hurt by this
awful
movie?
Have you seen it?
I've seen the musical. I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, the musical was fine. Not great, but fine. I just started watching the movie because you can watch it now on Apple TV, and I'm shocked. People who love the movie, can you hum one song from it?
Well, yeah, Defying Gravity. It's a banger. What are you talking about? So what you just started watching the movie? So is this your review of the first 20 minutes?
3.5 freaking hours
of the
Believe
movie?
me, I saw enough. I watched 45 minutes of it.
All right.
While I was rowing.
There's Leo's review of the first 45 minutes of Wicked.
This is terrible.
All I'll say is that, like, as it happened, I spent a lot of my last days of like mid-break vacation like building the ultimate Broadway playlist on Spotify for myself. And a lot of it reminded me of, oh God, that was a good movie, but they had to cut like 4 of the best songs out of it for this, even though the soundtrack album has one of the best versions of one of the Killer songs. So on the one hand, like, I'm glad that when they made 1776 into a movie, they decided, screw it, 3.5 hours, we'll include the entire thing. On the other hand, yeah, I'm not sure if you can maintain the delight of a musical over 3.5 hours, then go home for a year, and then another 3.5 hours. But, yes. but I do want to see it because it looks like I know someone who knows one of the stars, and they've been telling me a lot about it during the production, and got this person like 110% cares about this, and has been okay. This is going to be fun.
I mean, it's fine if you liked it. That's fine. Wasn't for me.
That's fine.
And I like the original Wizard of Oz. I thought that was good.
I pre-sorted myself. I was like, that's not my film.
Not my jam.
Like, because I was like, I didn't.
I will say that when it first became a musical and I heard about like the clumsy version of a condensation of the storyline, I thought, oh, that's exactly what I don't want people to do with something in the public domain. But then, like, I actually saw it, say, okay, the thing that I hate when people do to certain movies, and they didn't do it, they did something completely different. It's like, okay, great. Yeah. It was. I thought I liked it a lot. I
like musicals. I'm not saying I don't like musicals.
That's fine. No, again.
And I'm holding space.
And I love. And I will say I love Wizard of Oz. Like if I
loved the Wizard.
If I ever have like a lot of time on my hands, my not because I think it's a good idea.
Kids might enjoy it.
I want to go back and replace all the matte paintings with like really high quality matte paintings.
Oh God, you're gonna run it.
I'm never going to release it.
Oh God,
my own.
Satan is inside your mouth. Spit out Satan.
I just want to do it because it'd be so like I just see.
Get ready. We're Picks of the Week coming up.
Oh no, there isn't enough resolution in this matte painting. No, it's perfect the way it is.
No, it'd be great.
Ouch!
Just don't put Jar Jar Binks in it, okay? I'm just saying. And that's our Vision. That's our Vision Pro segment for the day.
Now you see, now you know.
Jason was like, "What happened there?"
I don't even. Anyway, I don't like CES. Anyway, that's it.
I haven't been.
I've been grumpy today. I didn't like CES. I don't like Wicked.
I said how great CES is, but I realized I haven't been there since COVID, and I have to admit that I talked to a lot of folks, and like with the H5N1 as close to the surface as possible, I was like, this was going to be the year I went, and I was like, I think I'm going to take one more year off and just see. Hey,
but don't worry, because we are really prepared for a pandemic this time around.
Absolutely. Yeah. We got people who are on top of it. Robert Kennedy is going to be, boy, I'm so happy.
Forget the vaccines, forget the masks.
The man's a Kennedy. How could you want anyone better than a Kennedy? It's going to be
good this year.
Yeah. I don't know much more about him than that, but oh my God.
Cut this all out. Cut this all out.
Definitely the son of no, sorry.
You're watching MacBreak Weekly.
I will stop talking.
I wish we could get Merlin Mann back just for one visit. Maybe do a Merlin Mann Scott Bourne. You were there, Alex.
It'd be great. I'm in.
You were there, and you were there. MacBreak Weekly continues with our picks of the week. Now, since I am the guy who said the best part about Mac OS X is the Unix underlying underpinnings, I'm going to recommend what is oddly become a cause célèbre, a new terminal for Mac OS. A lot of people use iTerm. Of course, it comes with a completely competent terminal. There's no reason you need to use a different terminal program. But this new one's really fun. It's free. It's open source. It's Ghost TTY. at ghosttty.org. It does use Metal, which is nice. It's available for Linux as well as Macintosh, but on Macintosh it uses Metal. It has a lot of nice configuration features. It's got a very nice API. I think it's quite pretty. It's got built-in nerd fonts, which is probably a dumb idea since it's so easy to download the nerd fonts but it, if you don't want to download them, built-in themes, and it works with a variety of shells, not just Z shell, which is now the Mac OS default, but Bash, my choice shell, Fish, and a shell called Elvish. I really like it. ghosttty.org. If you aren't using the terminal, you ain't Mackin'. Jason Snell, your pick of the week.
Just added to the document in the nick of time. I finally bought some of those smart LED Christmas tree lights, the Govee Christmas lights too. And I know Christmas, it's only 350 days till Christmas now.
Start to get ready, man. Gotta get ready. But that means
that these $100 lights are currently on sale for $63 at Amazon as we're recording this. 66 feet. It will fit around a reasonably sized Christmas tree. And in fact, it's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and what it will do is you can actually hold up their app to the lights on your tree, and it sees the lights, and then it maps them, and then it can have effects like the lights go around, or the lights go from the bottom to the top, and other things that are just, they're not super smart, but they're smart enough. They've got a bunch of different patterns. I used them this year. First time I've ever had them. They were really nice. Literally, I could be like, oh, I'm in the mood for red and green blinking. I'm in the mood for something like for New Year's, it got all like purpley and stuff. There are all sorts of different patterns you can load in there. And yes, you can load in a thing where it moves along to the audio of whatever your like music you're playing in the room or movie that you're watching. And you can have that be coming out of your phone via the app, or it's got a little block on it with apparently a little microphone in it that you can have it use that will also kind of like vibrate the lights to whatever sound is playing in your room. Lots of variation.
They're
fun. Pretty. They're pretty and they're blinky. I like the blinking lights on the Christmas tree. And these are really well done. I was very impressed. I mean, the app isn't great, but it's good enough, and it does some really amazing things on your Christmas tree. And you know what? You don't have a Christmas tree the rest of the year. It's fine. Put them somewhere. Put them around a window or something, and have fun. Whatever. Like you can use them anytime. There's no law against it. There's no law in the rule book against. First off, that a dog can play basketball. Yes, a dog can play basketball. And two, Christmas lights are for all the time. Just light up your life.
And what about Scarecrow's brain? Yeah, that's and when you take, I have a set of those twinklies I got like 3 or 4 years ago, and yeah, like when they're off the tree, like sometimes for certain occasions I will like hang them in just like vertical strips. And because it's this most miraculous thing, okay, just aim the phone camera at the lights, however you've hung them, it will map them and essentially turn them into a really low resolution video display. And just now you can basically put anything on there and it will just plain work. It's super fun to have just as a thing to mess around with.
Yeah. And I think our tree, we had the same ones last year or something by Govee. I don't know if they're the exact same ones. It worked great for the tree. And now they're part of my daughter's room.
Yeah.
like they were mounted.
So yes, it's not just for Christmas anymore.
Yeah. Because they're so controllable. And if you haven't played with programmable string lights, and there's lots of different flavors of them. They're so much fun. Like and the apps are all a little quirky, but they all do enough, and they're really, really great. So.
Yeah. And I've tried these out, so I can recommend them. They're really well made, and the software is usable, and you get a pretty fun result.
Mr. Alex Lindsay, your pick of the week. I like it because it's zero Alex's.
It's zero Alex's. It already comes with your phone if you have an iPhone. I have to admit that this is me eating a little crow. When the cinematic mode came out of the iPhone, I was like, oh, this is dumb. Like, as someone who does this, I was like, I'm never going to use that. Like I'm like, if I'm serious about something, I'm going to use the Blackmagic camera and I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to use Kino or something like that. And so I was at a concert, and there's a band in Marin actually playing in Mill Valley on Friday, AZ ACDZ, which is a cover band for AC/DC. They also
they're the best band ever. Oh my God, I love
so good.
AC/DC.
Yeah, and the guitarist is amazing, and the half of the band. Half of
was
the band
it Josh Z? Is that his name?
Yeah, Josh.
He is a beast. He is second only to the guy in the schoolboy outfit, Angus.
Yeah. He's just amazing, and really and half the band is also in the Illegals, which is the Eagles cover band.
Another,
Joey and
for
Dave,
New Year's Eve, I went to see Petty Theft, whose lead singer is the keyboardist in the Illegals.
Yeah,
right. And the drummer is the drummer for Petty Theft is the drummer and the bass player for Petty Theft or rhythm guitar are in AC/DC. It's very complicated. So there's all these cover bands.
Six bands. The guitarist, six bands. Count them.
So good. Anyway,
in fact, when I saw Petty Theft, he came in late because he was driving up from another band he's playing in Nicasio, and he had to drive up to the Mystic.
Totally, probably coming from Rancho Nicasio up to there, and but
how did we get into this? I forgot.
Well, the Illegals did a bunch of test stuff with me when we were testing some shooting for theaters, and so Joey pointed out that they're going to play, and I was like, hey, can I come down and shoot some high frame rate stuff and everything else? So I was down there shooting it. And so once I shot it during the sound check. And so then I was just there. My kids came to see it. And my kids love going to live shows. And so we're watching it. And I thought I would just pick up. I was like, I wonder what cinematic mode is like. I was playing with it a little bit when I was doing I had a bigger Blackmagic camera shooting 120 frames a second, but I had my little camera. And I kind of went back and forth and I was like, oh, the focus works pretty well. Like it's zooming. And then so I figured I'd shoot a song, like sometime during the show. And, and so it was good. I was like, I can touch the screen and focus on who I wanted. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I was talking about it on office hours and I had forgotten all the features that it has. And so someone pointed out, I was like, it did pretty well. It missed a couple here and there. And someone said, you can refocus that in Final Cut. And I was like, what? How do you? And so, so if you look at it here, this is them playing here. If you look at this, this is in post. I just want to kind of point out like this, that's Josh right there playing away.
He's
there's
so good.
Dave and there's
Dave
Joey.
Is so good.
So Dave is singing over here, but if I want to change the focus, I just tap on it. You just tap
Joey.
on who, and you can,
Joey,
but you're actually like if I want to go over here, I want to come back up here and I can animate how I'm doing all of that in Final Cut with the
how is it doing that? It's recording multiple images.
So there's nothing everything's in focus, right? Because it's just a phone. And so it's doing computational.
It's all soft focus.
It's all software focus. So you can sit here and you can. You also have the depth of field here, so I can make it even shorter depth of field or longer depth of field. So I can move around. with what I'm doing here and play with what it's focusing on in that range. And the thing is that I again. I'm not probably going to do production with it, but I was like, this is the first year of film school. Like you could totally do, short films for school or I think that there's a lot of social media stuff, but I have to admit, I'm a little late to the game. I know, but I think it's worth saying like, hey, this is actually a pretty impressive feature that I kind of totally skipped over when Apple released it and thought it was kind of a kid's toy.
Just parenthetically, so you're that guy who's at the concert, not dancing, recording the whole thing.
One song. Okay. One song. I'm not the
you're
guy.
Allowed.
I'm not. So I'm definitely not the person. I barely.
There are always people at every one of these that don't do anything but stand there and record the whole thing.
And then they dance with it. I'm like, I always look at it going, you're never going to use that. Like you're dancing.
Never going to look at it again anyway.
You're dancing and you're going like this is my, and so usually what happens is when I shoot, I usually find a place where there's no one behind me because I'm really sensitive to it. So usually you'll always see me over at some angle or I'm standing right in front of a post. That's usually where I, where I'm kind of covered. And, or I'll shoot, if I'm shooting close up, I might shoot like for 30 seconds or 1 minute, of something to gather.
When you see me, I'm the guy with his iPad and the flap on the cover hanging down, shooting the whole show. No,
so I did it as a test. I did not shoot the whole. I'm not that guy, definitely. And so, but
we have to hang out. We're friends with Joey and Fernanda. We could get together and have a little party.
We should. Yeah,
I didn't know you knew Joey.
Yeah. So, a lot of the stuff that I think is on there on the illegals site is stuff that I might have shot.
I didn't know that.
Or some of it is anyway. So yeah. So
I think arguably that's the best cover band name is Illegals.
Yeah, and the Eagles are going.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, the Eagles are going after them for the. You know, like Eagles are just like it's Don Henley is just like maniacal about the Eagles songs. You know, and so but they are.
They don't spell it the same as the Eagles.
No, it's just the music, but they do sing the same songs. So the
it's a tribute. It's a
tribute band, and they're probably one of the better ones. And I you know, it was really interesting it was at Sweetwater and going to Sweetwater and having it packed. And you know, you really only live on how good you are as a cover band to be able to pack one, because it's not like you have released any new albums, you know. And and they're fantastic. And so anyway, so it was fun. But to get back to the cinematic mode, I would highly recommend, if you have a new iPhone that does it, go out and play with it. It's kind of amazing. Mode. It's kind of, and it's not just, I thought it was amazing when it was just doing cinematic mode. I didn't realize, I had just forgotten. It's been so long. I'd forgotten that I could refocus this in post in Final Cut. Pretty cool.
Would you recommend always using cinematic instead of video?
No, not necessarily. I think that I would. There's definitely things I shoot with video. I shoot with video more often. Yeah. You know, but a lot of times what I'm shooting like, I want to remember this. I'm not trying to make anything special. I just want to remember this moment for a second. You're going to get lower resolution, lower frame rate. I'm mostly shooting in 4K 60. So you know, I can't do that in cinematic mode. I think it's 1080p and 24 or 30. And so I don't think that. I don't think that cinematic is the thing you use for everything.
Specific use.
But if one thing I was thinking about doing is, you know, it'd be good if you had if you have a business and you're not a filmmaker, but you want to shoot something about your business for 2 or 3 minutes to put on your website or put on Facebook or something like that. I bet you could shoot a pretty impressive little 2.5 minute video with it that looked pretty awesome, that most people would think was great. You know, so that's the kind of thing I think it'd be good for. And social media.
Thank you. One more pick of the week. Andy and Otco, you're up.
One cool thing from CES that I obviously I don't own because it just got announced yesterday. I'm recommending it because it's actually available now and it's on sale for $10, $10 under. Anker, which is like my official provider of chargers, because they're awesome. They last forever. They're really good value, and they solve lots of problems. So they came up with they introduced a brand new one, which is a 140 watt 4-port charger that looks to be like about the size of like an old MacBook charger. It's a little bit bigger than this, but not terribly bigger than this. And 140 watts means it can, if you go to the site and you take a look at how that's distributed, that means that if you have an iPhone, an iPad Pro, and a MacBook Pro plugged into this at the same time through USB-C ports, I believe that means that all 3 of them can fast charge. So it's not just, so if you've got like a half hour in the airport and you can find maybe one outlet, if you're lucky, you can actually get your entire menagerie pretty much charged really, really, really quickly. And it's not just that it's 140 watt, like 4-port. Sorry, the 3 ports are USB-C. The other one is USB-A, legacies. And how much power it delivers depends on whether you're using just one or whether you're using all 4. So you can really get all 140 watts towards your MacBook Pro if you want to. But the other thing that makes it really, really cool is that it has an OLED display on it. So again, I have 2 or 3 of these, which is a 100-watt charger that does pretty much the same thing. It's got only about 2 or 3 ports here. But the thing is, like, I have to remind myself how much the MacBook is drawing, how much the phone is drawing. This has a color display that while you've got things plugged into it, will tell you, okay, your MacBook, whatever's plugged into this port is drawing 70 watts. This thing is drawing 30 watts. This other thing is drawing 12 watts. So you know that you're fast charging all these devices. And as someone who likes to bop around and get out of the office, and sometimes gets out of the office with a half-charged device, the ability to handle everything I've got in my backpack with this one little hostess cupcake-sized thing, and 4 cables, that's really attractive and really solves problems for me. It's $90. If you go to anchor.com, you can get $10 off for the next week. So until next Monday. Like the 13th or whatever. But yeah, I've already ordered it because it's like the ability to like not have to travel with like this bag full of stuff And just simply, if I've got this one thing, I'm good. Actually, it's not. If I've got this one thing plus one of these little like 10 for $20, little like 8-inch extension cords, because oftentimes like, oh great, so the only thing I can plug into is going to be completely blocked by other things. This will, maybe it's a double pick of the week, but that means that if you don't have enough room for like this entire block, you can just plug it into this, and now it'll just plug into basically any one little thing. Again, it sounds stupid. It's the most low-tech thing in the world, but like the amount of times that this has like saved my life has been like kind of incredible. Oh, and the last thing about it, I love like these simple things that a manufacturer like Anker only learns like after accidentally screwing things up or making a choice that wasn't really great. So one of the problems of having like a 3 or 4 port adapter like this is that like if you design it like the way that you might imagine that you want to do, because hey, you plug this into the wall and now you want to be able to see what you're plugging into. The problem is that now you've got these cables that are like hanging off of this and are going to be like trying to pull it out of the wall. So they moved all those 4 ports to the bottom. So now it's actually pulling downward, which hopefully will make it not fall out of the outlet quite so well.
So you're showing the old one. That's the new one.
That's the old one. Again, it just got announced and released like yesterday. Started orders, actually direct orders like today. It's not. I don't think it's a pre-order.
I've already purchased it. I just bought it. Thanks to you. Again, look for the Anker charger, 140 watt. That's how to
140 watt, 4-point power delivery, 3.1. Yeah. If you go to the Anker site, it will say new because it is new. It was just 24 hours old.
Yeah. This is we're now seeing the payoff on this gallium nitride technology. I want to see more of it. You get so much power. 140 watts in that little thing is
all I got.
And if you think, oh gosh, I got enough chargers as it is, and I got USB-C chargers. The thing is, if you bought it like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it maxes out at 40 watts, and that's the reason why you're wondering why you can't get out of away from this. You can't charge up your devices that quickly. So last year, I think it was a Black Friday sort of thing where I said, screw it, I'm inventorying all my chargers, and I'm going to relegate the ones that I'm going to replace all the ones that I really need to use. I'm also going to replace the cables so that I know that they're capable of charging and handling at these kind of wattages. And it was a very positive life move. Actually, it was 2 years ago, but which is how I explained to myself, no, this is a special new charger. I know that the old chargers work great, but this will be special. It will help me. And we've got $90. We're going to make $80 again real quickly. Let's just buy it.
Just a drawer labeled chargers.
Yeah, I actually have a white paint mark that I had a mark on every one of the old ones. This is old. And what are the charging capabilities of each one of these? Because otherwise you're just otherwise you're just pulling it out of a box, and then you screw yourself up. Like
I always have to like take off my glasses and look at the little print and see how many watts.
Oh God.
Like I don't even put the ones I put in my car are 100 watts.
Yeah, I know. Just get rid of them all now.
Yeah, get rid of anything that's less than that. Yeah.
There goes Andy. He's going in his bag. Watch out, everybody. He's going in his bag. Anything could happen.
This is like one of the power adapters for one of my lights here. And at one point, I decided to basically label every one of them on their voltage because again, nobody can read the bottom of this. As much as I like Anker, it's dark gray printing that's minuscule on like a slightly darker gray background. You have to use your camera and then examine that. Yeah, at some point, this white paint marker I got and going through that entire box, making sure that I've got everything readable, has changed my life in a positive way in that I'm no longer exploding as many things by putting in the wrong adapters.
Thank you, Andy, for your pick of the week. Thanks to everybody for a great show. Andy and Aqua, when are you going to be on GBH next?
Next time, I'm on a week from Thursday at, I believe, 12:30. Go to wgbhnews.org to listen to it live or later, or listen to any of the previous stuff I've done there.
Nice. Mr. Jason Snell is at 6colors.com. You can find his writing there. Also, a link to all his podcasts at 6colors.com/Jason. Anything particular you'd like to mention?
Check out the piece that I wrote about OS 10, and you can link to, from there, James Thompson's piece, which is worth a read and is a lot of fun. And you can find that story that I wrote. I'm also linked to that is from the year 2000 that I wrote the day of that announcement that went in the magazine. And I know that only because I found my old Word file, which is dated that day. at 6:50 p.m. So obviously
Holy
I walked
cow.
back to the office, spent the afternoon writing, and then that story went into the magazine.
History in
So,
the making.
it's fun. Anyway, so check that out. And you can get to all of the stuff that I write everywhere, even at Macworld, by going to sixcolors.com.
If I had the video of you then coming on Call for Help to talk about it, I would play that.
Man,
But
there's a
all that
VHS
stuff's lost
somewhere.
forever. Yeah, somewhere. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Leo.
Mr. Alex Lindsay, officehours.global. Anything to report?
Every morning we're getting up, answering questions. One of the things we're starting to do, which we're not warning anybody about, we just do it, is we have special guests that come on just for a couple minutes. Like hey, we've got something new coming on.
Yeah.
Though I will tell you that I think that Laura Davidson from Shure will be on tomorrow morning. So she's going to talk about that new MV7i. But just for a couple minutes, like rather than a whole hour of it, we're just like, hey, here's something new that we thought was cool, or somebody else that can come on and answer a couple questions. And so you'll see more of that coming out. But otherwise, it's 7 days a week. We get up and at 7:00 in the morning Pacific Standard Time and answer an hour of questions, and then go back to what we were doing.
I love the suggestion from our YouTube chat. Kevin Schertz says, Andy, when you got the white Macker out, you should write property of Andy on all of those as well. We'll call out to Toy Story, I think.
Well, exactly. Well, on the bottom of its boot. Yeah, that's a good idea.
On the bottom of its boot. Hey, before we go, one more little thing I'd like to ask you to do. Take our survey. We only do this once a year. It helps us with advertisers. It helps us understand what you're interested in, what you want to hear more or less of. The TWiT 2025 survey is open at twit.tv/survey. Should only take you a few minutes, and thanks in advance. Thank you all for being here. We do MacBreak Weekly every Tuesday. We're back, the brand new year, and I hope another 52 exciting episodes of MacBreak Weekly every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. That would be 1900 UTC. You can watch us live on 8 different platforms now. Of course, our club members get behind the velvet rope in our Club Twit Discord, but there's also youtube.com/twit/live, twitch.tv/twit, LinkedIn, Facebook, x.com, TikTok, and Kick. All of them. Of course, who knows what'll happen in 2 weeks with the TikTok one, but, we'll find out. We'll find out. If you don't want to watch live, you don't have to watch live. If you're live, then you can chat with us in many of those platforms. But if you don't want to watch live, just download a copy at the website, twit.tv/mbw. There, when you're there, you'll see a link to the YouTube channel dedicated to the MacBreak Weekly video, or subscribe in your favorite podcast client, audio or video, your pick. They're free. Just go to, Pocket Casts, Overcast, whatever you use, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe. That way you'll get it every day the minute we're done. Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday. Stay tuned if you're watching live. Security Now coming up next. But unfortunately, it's my sad duty to tell you all to get back to work because break time is over. Bye-bye.